welcome to a Stab in the Dark. Now, every week we are going to be talking about a horror film, and it could be any horror film.
Apart from this week.
Apart from this week, yes, because this week
the technicalities
the intro
already.
episode.
and today will be a special occasion because this is our introduction. So we're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to talk a bit about some of our favourite horror films and some of our pet peeves and some of our least favourite horror films and some underrated classics. So let's introduce each other. So you've already heard from Mike over here. How are you today, Mike?
I'm very good, thank you, Joe. I'm glad to be here on the A Stab in the Dark podcast, as I will be going forward.
Lovely. And Dave, how are you, mate?
I'm good. I didn't know he was going to be doing this the whole time.
I know.
Yeah.
Doing what the whole time? What am I
Doing
doing?
Doing the podcast. I didn't sign up for that.
This is a duo thing.
Yeah, we just needed a third person for the seat, right?
Yeah, but I'm good.
Who wanted to go first then? Who wants to?
Well, can I ask a question before we
go
get
on,
going? Yeah, I'm just curious why the two of you want to do a podcast. There's two reasons for me. First, I mean, I love horror movies. The second reason for me, is why I think people might want to listen to it is that the three of us, I mean, as we'll kind of come to discover, are kind of at different points, in our horror movie watching career, right? And I think that everybody listening is going to identify with one of us at some point. And I'm pretty excited to, kind of go on this journey, and we'll kind of probably change each other's opinion and learn about our own taste and each other's taste. And I hope, the audience can enjoy that with us.
Yeah, awesome. Same really. It's a great excuse to get together with a couple of mates every week, like you would at the pub, and just talk about your favourite horror films. Now, you two definitely know a lot more than me about horror movies, but I think part of it will be me learning quite a lot as we go forward. I do watch them quite a lot, but I definitely do not have the knowledge of either of you two. So it's going to be a really interesting ride to go on and kind of learn a lot, and a lot of the stuff that, to be honest, I've never had the time for. So hopefully we can condense that into a podcast sort of format.
Yeah. Well, part of the fun of watching movies with friends is watching it with someone who hasn't seen it before, right? So that's part of the good dynamic. As for me, why I'd want to do a podcast, I already listen to podcasts about horror movies as it stands because I'm interested in horror and always have been. And I'm typecast basically. If we're going to typecast all of the people here, I'm the dweeb of the bunch in terms of knowing about horror movies. I'm the one that's supposedly supposed to bring some knowledge, and I hope I can bring that, and just sounds like fun. It is what we, as Dave said, do at the pub anyway. So
yeah, awesome.
Situating the pub with my beer there, and we're just recording it.
Basically a makeshift pub we've got here.
Yeah, pretty much. Even got the beers, right? Yeah.
Wish my house was a pub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mike, you were so kind to sort of do a little template of some horror movie related best films, like a top 5 or something.
Correct.
And since that's the case, do you want to go first? Do you want to?
For my top movies?
Wow, yeah, go for your top movies. How many? Did you stick with 5 or did you just go completely off
broke
the
the
rails?
rules immediately.
Your own rules.
I
You
said.
broke your own rules.
I did say that they weren't rules. I said there were more
here we go.
guidelines. But okay, so my first top horror film for Mike Rogers is The Descent, 2005.
Nice.
Which I think is... The 2000s were a bit of a dark time for horror. I think a lot of people would agree. There was a lot of remakes and sequels and just generally not good stuff going on. But The Descent is... Yeah, exactly. I mean, Saw is fine, but then you've got 9 of them afterwards.
Some of them are fun.
Yeah, well, fun, but not good. Not deserving of a top horror
I don't know,
list.
man.
Yeah.
I like some of the sequels better than the original.
Well, Saw X is great.
Yeah.
That's true. So, yeah, I mean, The Descent, I think, is brilliant because it's got this enclosed setting in the cave. I think I don't know whether it's a base human fear to be claustrophobic when you're underground and there's water and that kind of stuff.
Definitely is for
I think
me.
that's definitely definitely a scary situation. And then you chuck in the monsters who are blind, and I don't know whether we're talking about these in a spoiler kind of way. Or
We
are now.
Have you seen
We are
that?
now.
I
Yeah,
guess
yeah,
we've all
yeah.
seen the Descent anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just a genius movie. You got this claustrophobic situation. The monsters are thrown in for fun. You got quite well written female characters in the group of divers.
Especially in that time period in the 2000s.
Yeah, correct. Bit of a dark time for that. Dark time for a lot of things, right? 9/11 happened and so on.
Immediately brings in 9/11.
Well, Hitler hasn't been mentioned yet, but yeah.
Oh, that'll come.
Well, I just said his name, but who's that guy? Who knows?
Yeah, but The Descent is one of the best jump scares in horror movie history, in my opinion. You know, that first reveal.
Yeah,
like
sure.
I'll never forget the first time seeing it. Spoiler alert, it's on my list too. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, it's on my list as well.
Yeah,
we've all three got that one.
I hope we haven't all got the same 5 movies.
I don't think we definitely don't. Because I reckon my top movie is going to be on your Overrated.
I see.
Okay.
Crack it out.
Yeah.
Because my number 1 is the original.
Oh, you've ordered them?
I've ordered them, yeah.
This is your favourite horror movie of all time?
This is my favourite horror movie.
Okay.
And it's the original Halloween. Now, that is probably going to be on someone's overrated list, but I just love it. I'm not sure completely why. Maybe it's Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance, and it's just the kind of vibe you get from it, that like late 70s, the John Carpenter theme tune, the Halloween theme, and also you think of how much over the years a lot of other films have just used it as a springboard to work off. A lot of people do say Texas Chainsaw, but I think actually the sort of slasher, which we know of more when Friday the 13th came out and all of that.
Yeah. All of these are very important pioneers of the slasher genre. And Halloween, Texas Chainsaw came out. Some people don't even argue that it is a slasher because it's kind of folk horror. But Halloween is what really started the boom, right? Like between 79 when Halloween came out and about 84, there was every major studio was just making like a million different slashers.
Because it was an independent production, right? Like there was no company behind him at that time. So it was like the most successful.
And I think he had a couple of movies under his belt.
But the actual production.
But I don't think he was like a massive, like he was in the 80s. He wasn't a massive name that people would go and see the John Carpenter movie. It's definitely not a movie I would include in my overrated. Okay. I love Halloween. It's not in my.
Maybe David. We'll find out.
Spicy takes over there. And shit all over Michael Myers. He's going to say Halloween 6 is the best one over there.
Do you know? You say that though. I actually love the whole Halloween.
Well, the Thorn
franchise.
Trilogy.
I love the Thorn trilogy. Why not?
Yeah.
Like I just think they're fun, and I know you're saying about like.
It's got real low lows.
Yeah, but I love the low lows. Sometimes that's what I love about slasher movies, actually in general, is that they can be terrible. But I love them for that too.
Are we including?
It's kind of like comforting in a way. Like
exactly.
The formula of
I think Halloween is weirdly, even though it's a horror film for me, it's quite comforting, and it's something I will always go back to.
I get that. I also think with Halloween, like the Halloween vibes. It's supposed to be set in Illinois, right? But I think they filmed it in like California or something. But it's just like that like autumnal vibe that they managed to capture, like perfectly, like suburban autumnal vibe. I mean, I like Halloween, and I appreciate Halloween. It is on my overrated list.
It is. No.
Here we go.
Spoilers for later on.
Yeah.
No, we're talking about it.
Spoilers.
So, it's not time for River Song. It took you 5 minutes to get River Song in. Like, I like it and I appreciate it. What I find, and I love John Carpenter. I love the soundtrack.
Doesn't sound like you.
I love.
Dave.
I appreciate it.
Overrated.
I appreciate it just enough. I love Carpenter, like Laurie Strode, of course, is like the prototypical like final girl. What I find is that I like the idea of it 1,000 times more than I enjoy watching it.
I think the problem here is the Seinfeld effect, though, right? It's what I don't know whether that's popular.
I don't know.
Maybe explain it.
I only know more about him now.
The Seinfeld effect basically is... it's called the Seinfeld effect because of the Seinfeld TV show, obviously. And if people go back and watch the Seinfeld TV show now, after watching all of the things that it inspired, they don't think it's as original as it was at the time. And I think that applies with Halloween, because Halloween basically, I wouldn't say invented, but popularized a lot of the tropes that slasher movies have followed, at least for the 20 years following it. So I think it's a fair thing to say that it's not as good as it was at the time. But I think if you watch it with the mindset of the time, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, but for me, like there were 3 movies that came out before, like 3 slashers that came out before.
Black Christmas.
Yeah, I mean Black Christmas is like my favorite slasher,
Mm.
at least from that era. I think it's super underrated. I might have got it on my list.
I wouldn't even argue if you'd have say that was better than Halloween.
Yeah, I do think it's better than Halloween. I like it better than Halloween. We recently watched Peeping Tom as well. I think that's better.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not even on my spicy takes list, but I think Peeping Tom is better than Psycho, which is probably...
I might agree with that. I could rewatch Psycho.
Yeah, because they were released in the same year, and yes, Psycho pushed the boundaries, but Peeping Tom, pushed the boundaries so hard that the director didn't work again following on from it. You're not going to know any of this, I'm presuming.
Not really.
We can cover it.
We're going to get around to it. We're going to watch it.
Yeah.
And I mean, what you're saying about Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well being a folk horror is kind of interesting. I haven't really thought about that. But I mean, I've been kind of classifying it as a slasher in my mind. And I mean, for me, that's there's
not one killer, right? It's set out in the wilderness. Would you call Hills Have Eyes a slasher?
No.
And Texas Chainsaw has a lot more in common with Hills Have Eyes, I would say, than Friday the 13th.
It almost hardly fits into a nice, neat box, like some of them, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, the best movies don't just slot right into a box, unless they invented the box, Black Christmas.
But I mean, how do you, you're implying that, being a slasher is mutually exclusive from being other things.
No, it can be multiple things.
Yeah. I mean, Midsummer, right, is, through a certain lens, a slasher.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a folk horror.
Well, I wouldn't call it a slasher. I'd call it a folk horror, not the same as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It depends how you define slasher. For me, there's got to be either one killer or a group of killers a la Scream that are all dressed the same and you don't know whether there's multiple or not. I don't know whether that's a core tenet of the subgenre that everybody subscribes to.
I don't know.
Whether that's just my personal thing.
I just think of a bunch of people getting killed one by one. Maybe one.
Then the Descent is a slasher.
Maybe human killers, maybe, right, or humanoid, like Michael Myers, supernatural.
Right, okay. The second one on my list, my unordered list, I should clarify now, is Thirst from 2009.
Oh, good choice.
Which is a Park Chan-wook vampire movie. It's very gritty, set in modern day Korea, and I can't really remember how they contract the vampire virus, but they do. And then they have to break into blood banks, and they grow more and more desperate because obviously they were poor people to start with, and they end up having to go to vaster extremes. It's him and his girlfriend that are vampires, and his girlfriend's getting more and more off the rails, and he doesn't know how to keep her under bay. It's a brilliant movie. I think it's one of the best vampire movies of all time. And when we get to subgenres, I'm going to talk about how great I think vampire movies are in general.
I've never actually seen it, so
yeah,
it's very interesting.
Well, I mean, I could have, if it wasn't in my top list, I could have put it in my underrated list, honestly. But yeah,
I don't think I've ever actually even heard of it. So I think, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel that people that know about it rate it correctly. It's just not very well known, right?
Yeah, which is surprising because Parasite won the Oscars.
Yeah.
2 years ago, was that 3 years? I don't know. Is it in COVID? Who knows?
2020, something like that.
Yeah. So he's a popular name, and obviously Oldboy was released before.
I mean, that was a breakout,
Thirst, and that was
international
extremely
hit.
famous.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. If anybody out there hasn't seen Thirst, they should. And anybody here hasn't seen Thirst.
I should, yeah.
They should. But yeah, my next one is The Entity from 1982, which I'm guessing you also haven't seen.
I haven't seen that.
No. We watched it together.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago. It was really good.
He recommended it to you. I think that's also a brilliant movie. I'm not a big fan of ghost house movies or ghost movies. It's not actually one of my genres that I said I'm not into, because there's ones I'm less into. But they tend to be somewhat formulaic, and I'm not a big fan of the formula. But The Entity is so brutal, and the basic story is it's this woman and her 3 kids, I think. They're living in this house, and all of a sudden she gets assaulted sexually by a ghost, and nobody believes her. Obviously, it's like the classic trope of the time of the woman being thought of as insane and that kind of thing when she's going through something. And it's just people denying her. She gets to see this psychologist who's saying all kinds of crazy things about what's going on when she knows it's actually going on, and we know it's actually going on as the audience. And well, I won't spoil it, but it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's actually allegedly based on a true story. I don't know how true that is, obviously. I don't think it's true, the ghosts, but interesting. Next one, we've already talked about it, so I don't know whether I should go into more detail, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974. Nice. I think any top horror list is incomplete not including that, in my opinion, because I think on a pure objective basis, or if I was to say what I think is the best rather than my favourite horror movie, I would say Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think that nails it off the bat, and especially being so early in 1974.
Yeah, that's like best horror movie, but not necessarily, doesn't have to be your favorite, right? Like you can kind of acknowledge it as your best, as like the best horror movie, like the most effective.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think Schindler's List is worse than Groundhog Day, but I prefer Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, Groundhog Day is more rewatchable just because it's not so horrific.
I mean, for a start, it's only an hour and 40 minutes, not 3 hours, let alone the subject matter.
Schindler's List is like once every 10 years sort of watch. Cause
I think it's been longer than that for me. I've only seen it once and I was probably 15 at the time, so due for a rewatch. Next one is Child's Play. We don't have them on display right now, but these two know that I have Chucky dolls and Tiffany dolls, so clearly a big fan. I have Chucky socks on, probably not in the frame.
No, you'll have to put your foot right up.
Yeah, for weirdos.
Some do like a little sexy pose.
They're not bare, thankfully. Yeah, but I think, I mean, you could possibly argue it's comedic enough for it to be a comedy horror. The later ones certainly are, and I wouldn't include it in my scariest movies, certainly, but I think it's brilliant. I think Brad Dourif, his voice or presence in anything is pleasing to me, and it's one of the most, talking outside of the first one, it's one of the most trustworthy franchises, apart from Cedar Chucky, which is fine, tending towards bad. They're all good, even the TV show.
You know what's super cool about the Chucky franchise and why it's so consistent is that they've had one guy helming the whole thing.
Oh, really?
This guy, Don Mancini.
Yeah, even the TV show, which is surprising. Yeah,
I think he started out as a writer, but at some point started taking over direction. I think it may have been Seed, actually.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Evil Dead situation with Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Sam Raimi didn't direct them all, and I think Don Mancini wrote all of them, possibly.
Yeah, I think so.
Didn't direct them all.
I'm not sure about the new like remake one, but yeah.
But I think that is an interesting thing because
that's
Evil Dead is also one of the most trustworthy franchises as far as I'm concerned. So you keep the original creator along, and it's all good movies. Unlike Halloween, mate. Going back to that.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
That's harsh.
And then that leads me nicely on to my last one, which is Evil Dead 2. So, masterpiece, best comedy horror of all time.
I've seen the first one, and I started the second one, and it wasn't anything to do with the movie. I was just knackered. I felt sick.
So you quit out.
I quit out, but not because of the movie.
Yeah, he hastily adds. so
I would get it in the neck
argued at. Yeah, but I think the entire Evil Dead series is great, and Evil Dead 2 is the standout movie of the bunch. It's basically kind of a remake of the first one. So if you've seen the first one, you kind of know the plot. And
but you're also not prepared for like how bananas it gets.
How crazy it goes at the end. Yeah.
It's kind of like it's not a brilliant example, but like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1. Like that, it's almost like a genre change from the same creative team. Is
that the one with Dennis Hopper?
Yeah.
And that one's
Chainsaw Fight. Yeah, it's great.
I love that one. I mean, it's not the first one, obviously, but it's super fun.
No,
well, it's more fun. I would say, yeah. And that's my list done.
Right, so I've already said number one for me, top horror is Halloween. I've already given you some reasons for that. Number two, I put The Descent. I really love that one. It's one of the earlier ones in my life. A lot of them are quite more, in a way, personal to me rather than just being historic. They've affected my life in some way. And The Descent, I actually was like, oh my god, that's actually really scary. And I'm pretty claustrophobic. Hate the small spaces. I remember going to Wales as a kid and actually going into a cave system and crying and having to like sort of come out. I went to the Black Country Museum and could not stay in the mines for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I went with the school and wandered off and got told off. So
why did that school take you anyway? You're a liability.
So I wasn't even trying to be naughty. I think I just got lost. So.
Yeah, so The Descent just hits a lot of marks, and I've not really been able to find a horror movie that sort of disturbed me in such a way like that because of how it I mean, I watched The Descent too, and I was thoroughly disappointed in comparison.
Oh my god! Let's just pretend it doesn't exist.
If we ever do some kind of episode on worst sequels ever, then that's going to be on there.
Oh my god, that would be a long episode.
Not only does it, I mean, I don't know whether we should go into deep, but not only does it suck on its own, but it kind of like you have to forget it exists because it kind of derails the first movie,
does,
right?
Yeah. It's very annoying. And so number 3, I've put Pearl. So quite a recent.
Okay. Yeah. Possibly the latest movie all of us are going to choose.
Yeah, I think probably, yeah.
But there's just something about it. It speaks to my sort of artsy side. I did a drama degree, and I was trying to do a lot of like sort of random shit on stage, like live art, Marina Abramovich style stuff. Me and some friends from uni. So it speaks to the part where I think I'm right in saying, Dave, that it was filmed immediately after X.
Yeah, that's right.
Just because they had a bit of spare time or something.
Yeah, I believe
didn't they covertly do it, right?
Yeah, I think it was under the same like budget, like within the same budget of X. They filmed it super cheap. Because I think like Mia Goth was just like they were together, her and Ty West, like just talking backstage, just kind of working at the backstory for the character.
Yeah,
and like, well, we have enough material here to put a movie together.
That's kind of exactly the reason why I love it, is because of it's put together. And we recently watched Maxine, and I was actually kind of really underwhelmed by it. And it's almost like that had the issue of being overproduced and thought of so much that they lost their way. They didn't just do it. They had a lot of time to think about it. Whereas Pearl just kind of came off the back of X. And so I kind of like the haphazardness of it, and I enjoy it all as like a Wizard of Oz sort of vibe parody, themes of that. And it also came out in the time when the pandemic was happening, and they go to the Spanish flu, and there's all those parallels with our modern world. That was
brilliant. That was, yeah.
And I've watched it. I think since it came out, I might have watched it about 5 or 6 times. I watched it twice at the cinema. I watched it once with you. I think I watched it with my housemate when I was in Australia, and then recently I just threw it on TV when it was on with my mom, who was about to go to bed, and she hates scary movies. So I was like, let's watch this quickly. And she stayed up for the whole thing and watched it. And she said, okay, that's interesting. So it kind of is very broad, and it's really interesting. So it just fits within what I love for a movie.
I would argue that Pearl, along with Toni Collette in Hereditary, as possibly the 2 strongest acting performances in horror as well, or at least recent horror.
For sure. No Oscar nomination is a travesty.
2005. But they never do that for horror people.
Nah. But then Mia Goth's like shouting in a field, "I'm married!" Like in such a way, everything she does is 100%. Like she gives absolutely everything. I can't imagine what it'd be like off screen when she's done one of these scenes. She's probably absolutely shattered after.
Yeah, well, that scene at the end when the credits are rolling, right?
Yeah,
and it's just focused in on her
How
face,
amazing
and
is that?
she's just basically breaking down.
Yeah, I love it.
Insane, brilliant. Yeah.
So yeah, Pearl there, and number 4, I put 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
There's just something about it's another one that freaked me out a bit, but those scenes at the beginning of London when they filmed like early in the morning and before any cars are on the roads, and just the tone of that whole opening 20 minutes until he goes into the church, and then he's like says hello and it echoes, and then someone just goes boom, turns around. I'm like, and then the whole film takes a turn where the zombies are actually really fierce. A lot of these zombies movies are, they're not that fierce, and the zombies become sort of secondary in a way, and they do become that, but in a very interesting way when they find Christopher Eccleston
because it revolutionized what the zombie was to a certain extent. I don't know, because I'm not big into my zombies, but I don't remember there being running zombies and
it's well credited,
like non-Romero zombies.
Definitely credited for doing it. I'm not sure if it actually was
popularizing,
for sure,
pioneering.
I think it revitalized the whole genre, right? Like
Well, the 2000s was chock full of zombies.
It was probably started a bit of a boom period for zombie stuff, didn't it? Ending probably with the Walking Dead or around that time.
Yeah.
Or was it Train to Busan?
Train to Busan.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
modern,
extremely good also.
They're all over video games around the time as well.
Yeah.
Nazi zombies
Resident
and everything.
Evil and everything. Yeah. And then finally I've put number 5 again. It's almost zombie, somewhat possession, is Rep 2. So I'll put that in there as number 5.
Interesting.
Cool choice.
Interesting
and you
put
2 above 1
and
as
not
well.
1.
Yeah.
Rep 2, like the first one is fantastic. I did the cardinal sin when I watched it because I didn't realise what the original film was. So I actually watched Quarantine first.
And which is shot for shot, right? It's
yeah,
like
shot
exactly
for
the
shot
same.
of Wreck in a different language. Like, it has to be American.
Yeah,
but,
it has got Deb from Dexter in, which is a good...
Is that a selling point? Is it?
Is that really the selling point?
Like, if Quarantine, I mean, I know it's basically... I don't know, is it like a Ring situation where it was the same creators, or they...
No,
or
I don't think
it,
so.
They were
It's
just
different.
They just bought
just an
the
American
license and then made it again.
So.
That lessens it a little bit.
Yeah,
then.
it's interesting that you saw like the remake first.
Yeah.
So how did you enjoy Wreck then? After
Reg was great after that. I watched
Yeah.
these a long time ago, but Reg was fantastic after that. But because it had already been when I watched Quarantine, I was like, oh, this is genius. This is great. I then went to Rec and sort of knew what was going to happen because it is basically shot for shot. Whereas Rec 2 I watched and I was a lot more excited in the moment. So again, it's very emotional, very personal. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best one. It just means for me, Rec 2 always had more of an impact on me. And also, like, I remember watching it with a friend from school, and we both liked football. And the Reverend in it looks a lot like David Moyes, the manager in football, which probably neither of you will understand.
But take your word for it.
I pretend I know who it is.
But we were just laughing and taking the minute. So I just have good memories of the film, and it's pretty scary. And then there's that like really freaky bit at the end where it's like the slug thing going into like the. So it's just, it has a lot of memorable moments to me, and it was before that sort of raggedy sort of like woman, you know, the really thin woman who they make
like
all gruesome.
Your Marmars and your...
it's in everything. Like, Barbarian and
But then it was quite shocking, and I remember seeing that going, oh my God, and when it goes into night vision, and and it also introduced me, well, Quarantine did really, but it introduced me around the found footage stuff. So all those movies around that period, like Quarantine, Rec, and Rec 2, were kind of my introduction to found footage. Which is,
I think we're going to talk about that at some point, but we're all big fans of found footage, right?
Yeah.
Go on then, Dave.
Well, I mean, just like following on from what you said about Rec real quick. For me, like Rec 1 and 2 are almost like the Lord of the Rings, where I better even distinguish them as two movies, like, because they, run right into each other. Some elements of Rec 2 are parallel to Rec 1, right? And they're so closely tied that I can't, watch Rec and then not watch Rec 2 straight away.
So I need to rewatch it. I think I've seen Rec 1 multiple times and only Rec 2 once.
Oh, that's insane. It's basically just as good. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think for me it's the stink of 3 and 4. Like, if I watched 1 and 2, then maybe
which
I'd
is the one on the boat.
Oh,
3 is so bad.
He's not great.
Oh my God.
It's
not even fan footage.
Nobody would be serious about that. I knew you weren't serious. Yeah.
Okay. For me, I'm amazed that I didn't really, no particular order, but I'm amazed that nobody said Scream. Really?
Well, it's a very good movie.
Yeah.
Scream is right up there.
Yeah.
It is right
if it was a top list of slashers, I'd probably put it up there.
Halloween takes Scream for me.
Scream is my favorite slasher. It's they're easily my favorite slasher. It was also one of the first slashers I ever saw, and so I still appreciate it despite not having all the context. And so I don't know exactly how old I was when I first saw it, but every few years, especially as I started getting really into horror, I'd come back to Scream and appreciate a new reference in it. But it stands completely tall by itself. I mean, obviously it's helmed by like an absolute horror legend, right, in Wes Craven. I love the whodunit element of it. We'll talk about genres and stuff later, but any like mystery component in a movie, I love that, and I think that pairs so well with horror. And like whodunit slashes,
like with your Jallows and
for sure,
what they used to call horror, but they now call suspense, right? With Hitchcock's and stuff. That's like it was the bread and butter of horror for decades and decades, and for a while in the 80s they kind of forgot that because they just wanted the slashers and the identifiable killer, right? But Scream bought it back, which is good.
Well, I mean, they kept like the kind of killer branding, right? But they were able to have a new whodunit mystery in every single one, which is cool as well. And like the final act is just incredible. Like the violence is amazing. The opening is, in my opinion, unless you can think of another one, the best opening in any horror movie.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I'd seen it at the time when they were pushing it's Drew Barrymore. They're pushing Drew Barrymore as the star of the show, and that was advertising her as the main character, right? And then you walk into the cinema and you get whiplashed. So,
Okay. Again, no particular order. The Thing, John Carpenter.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Good choice.
My favorite Carpenter movie. My favorite remake, probably. Again, like, well, I mean, the special effects are unbelievable, right? Timeless. I hope we can do a whole episode on it at some point and really kind of get into like some of the behind the scenes stuff. Yeah,
it's a gold standard for like practical effects, right?
Yeah. And there's kind of a whodunit element to that too, right? You know, there's because like the body snatchers vibe there. So I mean, there's definitely a theme in the movies that I like here.
Who's infected type.
Yeah. It's kind of a similar kind of appeal. Like there's a mystery component.
There's an X-Files episode a bit like that as well.
Yeah. Ice, mate. Ice.
I
love.
Oh yeah, I watched that with you. Yeah.
Sandra Berkeley's in that one. I always remember for some reason. Anyway, sorry.
I haven't seen it for a while, but I remember that being good. I love those kind of like The Thing.
Yeah, but like it's like people locked in a location. You know, they're getting killed one by one. I love that.
Yeah.
You know? Like and I also I love sci-fi horror too, and so it just like kind of really kind of
Jason
scratches that
X.
itch for me. Yeah, I like Jason X.
See, I think
right up there.
I think it's good, but I personally think Halloween, Assault on Precinct 13. Would I put it third? Yes, I think I put it third. Yeah, I love The Thing. Well, Carpenter's such a good director.
Yeah,
he's got so many good movies,
yeah.
so it's pretty much academic at this point, which is the better. But yeah.
Okay, I also had The Descent on my list too, so I guess we all agree on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it was
the consensus podcast best movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it wins. It wins the it wins the.
Where
the
people
consensus.
get stabbed in the dark, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So there we go. Yeah, we can invent a reason that we called it that.
The Stab in the Dark award for best film.
I'm sure Neil Marshall is over the moon.
It's a prestigious award.
Yeah. For me, a bit like you, Joe. It was kind of like foundational in my like kind of entry into horror. It was kind of like the mid 2000s, right, that it came out. And I hadn't seen a lot of horror growing up. And I watched it with our friend Steve. And he watched a lot of horror movies. He had like older siblings. And he said this was the scariest one that he'd ever seen. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm ready for this. And it was really scary, like really scary. Yeah, everything you said about the claustrophobia, and again the jump scare. But again, a bit like Scream. It's a movie that I revisit often as I gain more and more kind of like horror context, and I find that it really holds up. Like the first half. I mean, it shows great restraint, right, in hiding the monsters for nearly half the runtime. Yeah.
Well,
it really fleshes out the characters.
I would argue, even if they didn't have the monsters, it's still a great horror movie just from the setting, right?
Yeah.
They also live up to expectation because a lot of these films, you don't show the kill or whatever for the first half, and then in the second, you see them and they're like, okay.
Yeah, the Insidious effect.
Or like the first and half of Jeepers Creepers is you don't know what's happening, and the second half you see him. I was a bit always underwhelmed by what the killer.
See, I'm a Jeepers Creepers defender, man.
We're going to talk about Jeepers Creepers. Don't worry about Jeepers Creepers.
There's a lot of controversy with that.
When he licks the bus, mate, it's great.
That's the second one. I like him in the second one.
Yeah.
But they turned him more comedic though.
Yeah, like Evil Dead 2.
Okay.
I feel like it's a good route, honestly, to go.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, like I just like I keep reappreciating The Descent every single time I watch it, and they show the restraint, and then as you say, the reveal's not disappointing, and I love the catharsis of like the final act when she kind of steps up, start fighting back. She's like killing them with that like rock pick thing.
Yeah,
and it's so satisfying. I love that, and I'm cheering for her the whole way. It's so satisfying. I love that movie. The final one, and this might be a bit controversial. I'm just curious what you think about it.
Should I get the shouting voice on?
Whoa, call your throat, mate. Call your throat until I say it. I'm curious what you think, but Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, brilliant choice, man.
Yeah.
It's controversial. It is controversial because a lot of people don't call it a horror movie.
Yeah.
I think that's
which I think is insane, but I mean,
well, I mean,
everyday life.
It's horror. I'd say it's horror. Life, it's a horror thriller.
Yeah,
it's not pure horror.
Sure, like.
But that doesn't mean it's not a horror movie.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm arguing.
I mean, I guess we'll probably talk more about what makes a horror movie, right, at some point. But
yeah,
But for me, I mean, like good porn, you know it when you see it, I think. And Hannibal Lecter is a horror character, right? Like, well, I'm just saying. Yeah. I mean that movie. So I also love crime procedural horror, like kind of like Silence of the Lambs, but also
there's something that you're not gonna like about.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it. And I mean, of course, Anthony Hopkins, like iconic performance, and actually won the Oscar for that. Jodie Foster as well, amazing.
Have you seen Manhunter?
Yes, I've seen Manhunter. Liked it. I did like it.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant as well.
Yeah.
I think anytime Silence of the Lambs is brought up, you should bring up Manhunter because it's got an unfair bid, I feel like, because that's a great movie as it stands. True. Red Dragon is good, but probably not as good.
It's fine. It's not that great. The book is amazing. The movie's kind of fine. Like Brett Ratner is like, he just adds nothing.
Fair enough.
Since
we can all agree Hannibal Rising is the worst. So.
Yeah.
You two can. I've never seen other than Silence of the Lambs.
So. Fair enough. We can talk about it at some point. Yeah, you've seen the best one, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, true.
That's more or less my top 5. I have a few honorable mentions, but we can maybe kind of talk about that another time.
Cool.
That's
good. It's a good list. I think we've all got some interesting. I don't think anyone's gone there and gone, or maybe just Halloween for you, Dave, because that's going to be on another list of yours.
Maybe. I think we might be coming back to it.
I don't think anybody disagrees with any of those as being good movies. Good picks.
Yeah.
Sure,
So how about then, Mike, your scariest movies of all time?
So,
maybe except for The Descent. Have you got anything on there except for The Descent?
I'm going to omit the last two, or at least say them in the same breath. I think The Descent and The Entity are both two of the scariest movies I've ever seen. I reckon The Entity would be scarier if I were a woman, perhaps, because of the subject matter. But I think nonetheless, it's a brutal situation to be in, and it's just... It's got these thumping tones. You haven't seen it, but it's these thumping tones over and over again. It's like a really aggressive soundtrack that goes alongside the brutal things that you're seeing, and I think it's just affecting. Yeah. As with The Descent, I don't really need to go into detail because we've already talked about it 3 times. So... these are the ones that aren't in my top horror. So I think The Grudge, the original Japanese one, Ju-on, is one of the scariest, if not, for me personally, the scariest horror movie of all time. Because it's got the sound, which is powerful enough, and it's got the meow and all that kind of shit going on. You're having some moth problems. We need that on the button, mate. Yeah.
We'll reprogram.
But, I watched it when I was very young, and it was probably one of the first non-English language horror movies I watched, which might mean that I inflate it in quality, possibly. But I have watched it recently and still thought it was great. And I think there's something about the atmosphere because it's very lo-fi. It's very like small budget, small cast, basically like one setting. And I think it's good. I do like the remake, and as a franchise, I think it's good as well. Even the kind of shitty sequels to the American one, quite like. They all have their scares just because they use the same motifs, and I think that's just a scary motif to be using. Second is probably going to be, it's like a popular pick, I guess, but I still think it's effective. I'm going to go with Paranormal Activity.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because I think I wouldn't put up there anywhere near the best horror movies of all time, but I think because it's got such a successful, I'm going to call it a gimmick, which might be a bit offensive to people that like the movie, but because it's got such an effective gimmick of these static cams and you're staring at a blank screen, nothing's happening until something happens, I think that's just a good recipe for scares, and horror doesn't necessarily mean it's a good horror movie, because some people would argue it's cheap, and I could even be persuaded that it is kind of cheap, but that doesn't make it not scary, I would say. If you watch that in the cinema with the jumps and the loud volume and the staring at the huge screen looking for things happening for the first time, that's a scary movie, in my opinion.
How did you find Skinamarink?
We watched it together, didn't we? Yeah. I thought it was good. It's not scary in the kind of way that Paranormal Activity is. I thought it was a very polarizing movie when it came out, right? And I didn't love it or hate it. I thought it was fine. I thought it was over long, even though it was an hour and a half. But it was over long for what it was trying to achieve with a dialogueless, characterless kind of staring at paint walls and stuff. If it was like 50 minutes long, I'd have probably loved it.
Yeah, I was thinking that like a mid-length, not like a short movie. But
Yeah,
like
an
an
in-between. Yeah.
So,
like the novella of the
exactly.
movie world.
Skinamarink, that he's trying to like essentially recreate like a childhood nightmare, and so most of the film is just kind of like strange angles of the camera just pointing at the wall, and that's really lots. And there's a lot of dialogue. There's kind of like kind of muffled, hard to hear. They have to subtitle everything, and it's very strange.
Yeah,
it's
the
like
sound mix is like a standout in that. Like, I imagine if you watched it in a cinema, I don't even know whether it got theatrical release, but if you watched it in a cinema when you got the clear, crisp sound mix, I'd probably like it more then. It's a good movie. And my final one is Climax 2018.
Oh, cool choice.
Yeah. I think that's scary in a different way to the other two because it's not supernatural. It's not. They were both supernatural. I had to check that. But yeah, it's not supernatural. It's. I'm guessing you haven't seen it.
No, sorry.
No. But it's basically it's a French movie where it's got a killer soundtrack as well. But it's a French movie where they're basically having this end of year party or something.
Yeah,
something
like that,
something like that. And somebody spikes the punch, I'm guessing, with like hardcore hallucinogens, and things get more and more depraved. Horrible things happen. There's a woman with a baby there, and horrible things happen. And I just think it's scary because of the visuals and because as a man that has done hallucinogens before, I think I can, like, I've never had a bad trip like that, obviously, but I think that is just an overwhelmingly realistic, scary situation to be in. And it actually makes me uncomfortable. I'd say more than any of the movies on this list, that makes me uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting watch experience. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. Despite them all being on hallucinogens, you're not kind of privy to what they're seeing.
No,
the camera,
like
yeah, you're an observer.
Yeah.
It's like you're kind of like a fly on the wall inside the club, and so you have to kind of infer from their reaction what's going on.
Yeah. So in effect, you're seeing all of the things that are really happening, and the things that are really happening are horrible.
Yeah.
And it's just like being in a mental asylum when these people are the victims of too much of a certain drug or a certain situation, etc. So horrible things are happening, and you're just a bystander seeing them destroy the things they love because they've been poisoned, so to speak. Yeah,
it's very uplifting. It's great.
Yeah.
I feel good.
It's like all Gaspar Noé.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to kind of watch this because. I'm going to write all of these down because I've not seen half of them.
This is like a watch list for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to write them all down afterwards.
Well, they're all movies I could talk forever on. So,
yeah.
I don't know what the runtime is, but we've already
probably
talked
a lot.
Yeah.
Shall I go through?
Sure. Yeah.
Actually, I don't need this. I think I know. The Descent. Surprise, surprise. One of the scariest of all time.
Is The Descent going to be on everything? It's going to be overrated and underrated at the same time.
Worst and best. Yeah.
And I don't know if this exactly fits the bill, but I'm going to go with it anyway. I'm going to say the BBC's Threads.
Brilliant movie.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Because
I would argue it's a horror movie, but a lot of people wouldn't.
Well, it is a horror. It is horrific.
It's horrific. Yeah.
I think it's one of the most emotionally affecting movies of all time.
Yeah. I mean, famously, I think Ronald Reagan watched it and decided he was going to sort of calm things down with the Soviet Union and stuff. So
before the dementia.
Before. I mean, I watched it, and I remember watching it one evening. I went on Reddit, and I sort of went, "What's the scariest horror movie ever?" And everyone kept saying this Threads by the BBC. I'm like, the BBC? I'm used to the BBC doing Doctor Who and things like that. But in this case, I was like, okay, let's watch it. And I watched it one night, and it starts out like an episode of EastEnders or something. But then I think that adds to the horror element of it because it starts so normally, and we're so used to something like a soap on the TV, or
it probably works a lot better for a British audience. I would imagine, because we, especially in the Midlands, we know people just like the characters in that movie.
Exactly,
and we live in places that look just like they live in. Yeah,
that's it. And I mean, and then the bomb drops, and then I remember the one character going, "They actually did it. They actually went and did it." And what also horrified me about it was this is sort of, I watched it just as things were escalating with Russia and Ukraine, some of this, and I was thinking there's so many parallels, and sort of the West not backing down, thinking that they're not going to actually do this. They're not.
Yeah,
but
imagine watching it in 1984 when it was released.
Yeah, even more horrific.
When the actual Cold. Yeah. I mean, it would have been the scariest in the 60s, obviously, but in the 80s there was still Cold War fever. The nukes could have flown at any minute before the Berlin Wall came down. But
so it just gets worse and worse in the sense that nothing gets better. Everything just gets worse, and they find that the government are inept, which we know now, obviously, quite well after all the COVID stuff. We also have the whole thing of afterwards. If you survive, then there's no ozone layer left, or little of it.
Surviving is worse.
Surviving is worse, and then there's feral kids, and there's just no let up, and it just gets progressively worse. You think, oh, if you survive, then maybe one day you can get better. Something will happen which sorts everything out, and it just doesn't. It just gets horrific and more horrific as you go on. And I remember finishing watching that movie, and it was quite late. It was like 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. I just didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep, and no movie's ever done that to me. No movie's ever stopped me from actually getting a wink of sleep. And then it was just in my mind for a few weeks, would like really affected me. So the fact that it affected me to that scale just puts it right up there as one of the scariest movies I've
seen
ever
it quite a few times, but the first time we saw it was in school.
You watched it in school?
I watched it as part of school. Yeah, as part of history, and in 2 parts. So we basically got like the relatively okay bit in one part, and then the horrible bit on the next part. And I think there was a lot of deflated people from that class for the rest of the day, because obviously it's one of the most depressing movies of all time, and visceral.
Yeah.
And I thought our school was dodgy for showing us Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Threads is an 18, possibly.
I don't know.
There's a bit of gore, but I don't think there's any swearing or nudity or anything that might have pushed.
Isn't that insane? Like, it just shows how bananas like the rating thing is.
BBFC and so on.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
I don't know.
I reckon nowadays, I think it's on BritBox or ITVX over here, because BritBox is gone and it's all been put into ITVX. But I reckon abroad you could probably watch it.
I didn't know
through
BritBox
the
was gone.
Yeah, BritBox is now.
Didn't have more than ITV stuff on there.
It's been it's still there, still all there. It's all in ITVX now. So yeah. So if you do want to watch it,
you have to watch it with adverts now.
Or you can subscribe for it too. But you know,
thanks,
just
ITV.
another one, for you there.
Thanks for that.
There's the true horror.
Today's
streaming
the
services.
Adverts. Bloody Jeff Bezos with his Amazon Prime adverts these days.
Oh, fantastic. And those are the only 2 really I put down on my scariest. I'm sure there's a lot more out there. Maybe, just in general, the Cybermen from Doctor Who.
Oh, you're bringing it back to Doctor Who.
Cybermen,
of course,
man.
Especially in the 10th Planet, the original one.
Oh, well, I haven't seen it, so I can't shit on
They're
it.
really horrific in there. So, but you know, the rest of the time they're not so bad. But in that one,
the Daleks not. I mean, I'm not a Doctor Who person. You know, I'm not a Doctor Who person.
Yes,
But
the Daleks are scary
not
because they do not actually represent humanity in any such way. Like, they are completely alien to everything we are. Whereas the original Cybermen used to be
they're
like
people
us.
Taken and made into Cybermen, aren't they?
Yeah, but they're a whole planet. Basically, they're a whole planet who decided, oh, we're not living long enough. We need to live longer. And when does humanity not become that anymore? When does it become robot? So it's they toe that line, and they don't have any emotions. So in the original one, they go like, oh, what about them? It's like, why are you know?
Is that another one of the buttons, man?
We're gonna make it.
Not like that. But they're really scary in the original one. And
I like the lore of Doctor Who. It all sounds quite cool. I just wish it wasn't so silly.
I feel like we could kind of pick you a route through it and pick some of the good episodes.
Yeah, maybe. It'd probably be. I mean, I like the Eccleston stuff. This isn't a Doctor Who podcast.
It is now.
I like the Eccleston stuff and some of the David Tennant stuff, but it lost me. It gets too wacky and silly, man. I'm not watching a children's TV show.
I turned off when he did custard and bloody fish fingers with Matt Smith.
I like the Matt Smith.
I'll get out.
What does that mean?
Exactly. What does that mean, Mike? What does that mean?
Is that a character?
You will be enlightened. We'll show you the way.
Yeah. Anyway, Dave, let's get back onto it. Your scariest.
I'm scared of the prospect of watching Doctor Who.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, scariest for me.
Yeah, I almost included that in mine.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I stuck to the 5 for that because I broke the rules in the previous one.
What?
There's a system. Carry on.
No, I remember. I remember a weekend you came to my house, Joe, and you brought like a bunch of like classic horror movies to watch. We watched a whole bunch of slashers. We watched Halloween. We watched Friday the 13th. We may watch the Halloween remake as well, Rob Zombie remake.
Oh yeah.
And at that time I hadn't seen many horror movies, like I said, but I felt I kind of got a handle on slashers at that point. We go to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think it was your first time too, right? Your first time watching it at that time?
Properly, yes. I do have one other thing where I saw it very briefly before.
Oh, right.
But that's also how I got into horror, which we'll talk about later.
Oh, yeah.
This was the first time I watched it all the way through.
Yeah. But, despite being the oldest one, like, it is a tough watch, right? There's no...
Gritty.
Very gritty.
Yeah, from the outset, it's kind of got a foreboding atmosphere and a pressure to it, and it just builds just like a kettle boiling kind of thing.
The Slaughterhouse soundtrack, like the fact that the cast were practically tortured in that heat, like it feels like it was just cobbled together, and not like a spot of gore or blood or anything. It's incredible. And so if someone was to ask me like what the best horror movie is, like the most effective horror movie, I would say that. It's not my favorite. It's not something I would come back and watch all the time. But in my opinion, it's the most effective at like achieving like that kind of horror emotive response.
Yeah, see, that's interesting because that's the reasoning I had for putting it in my top horror rather than scariest. Yeah, but it belongs in either, really.
Yeah. What else I got here? I'll put these next two together, I guess. They're both from like the mid 2000s, height of torture porn. Hostel and Wolf Creek.
You think Hostel's scary?
I've only seen it once. Again, kind of early. I watched it like when it came out, so I was kind of getting into horror at that time, and it really got to me, man. Like I just find it like just such a terrifyingly like plausible scenario.
Yeah,
I don't know. I guess I could watch it again, and I guess we'll cover it.
Well, I know I'm not shitting on it. I haven't seen it in ages either.
I've never rewatched it. But
it's Eli Roth, right? And it seems like every time Eli Roth does a horror movie, I like him less. But like.
Wait, Thanksgiving was good. Thanksgiving was good.
No. Apologies, Eli Roth. You're back on track. Yeah. But Hostel, from what I remember, it wasn't going for scares. It was going for
it wasn't.
disgust,
it wasn't.
Right?
No, yeah, exactly. It's like shock value. I think it was the implication or like the idea behind it I found much scarier, I guess, than what I saw on screen. I mean, there's some like gross out stuff. I could probably kind of take that.
It's shocking, is what it is.
It is quite shocking.
Yeah, and shocking is like next door neighbors to scary, right?
Yeah. But it's really just the idea, that you can just be taken and then just become like just disappear and then just become like a plaything for a psychopath. I find it really scary, and like I watched it. Yeah, I guess like 2006, something like that, and it's stuck in my brain for nearly 20 years.
It's a pioneer of a genre that carried on for like 10 years.
A genre I don't particularly like very much. But yeah, and similarly for Wolf Creek. I mean, Wolf Creek is not exactly the same as Hostel.
Yeah, I think Wolf Creek is brilliant. I could have put that in my top horror, honestly, because I love the Australian
very effective horror
dude.
Yeah.
Mick
John,
something.
Yeah,
Mick something
Taylor.
is his cat.
Taylor,
Yeah.
Yeah, again, like...
for some reason I know more of that.
You're the expert, man. It seems.
Well, you have been to Australia. Maybe you're like the Australian horror movie
funny
expert.
enough, I didn't actually watch it until I was in Australia. And I went to the pub on
That's an insane
Friday.
move.
Going for the realism mode. Watch. Yeah.
Did you go to the Outback the next day?
No, but I did soon after.
Oh, God.
I ended up actually like talking about it in the pub after work on a Friday with some guys from work, obviously. Yeah, easily said. And then after we talked about it, I was like, I should watch this. And I did, and I was completely freaked out because his portrayal is of someone of the outback in Australia. I worked on a farm out there, and there are people who lived in that town who are a lot like Mick Taylor. So it's just a guy who probably does actually live in Australia.
Yeah. It's aggressively realist.
Yeah.
It's like if Crocodile Dundee was a real person, and there probably are people just like Mick Taylor, apparently his name is.
Yeah.
I could imagine that. And I would imagine that if I was in the outback and I ran into a man in a big truck, who was laughs and jokes, but
a ute,
yeah.
as they call them out there. But yeah, definitely that's right up there because he is scary. And it did freak me out when I stopped off and slept. I did a whole thing where I slept in my car for a month, just traveling up the East Coast.
That's quite interesting because that's the only one any of us have put forward that's based around you watching it in when you were like adjacent to where the horror would be. It's like watching The Descent in a cave.
Yeah, awful.
on your phone.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's just the same as Hostel for me. Just the fact that I can just imagine that scenario actually happening. I mean, I haven't been to Australia, but for me, it was still effective despite not having gone. It's just that same idea of just going to some place and just disappearing, and just being completely at the mercy of. Oh, but yeah, that's my whole list. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, all good picks again. I don't think I disagree with any of those.
They're all, yeah.
I'm waiting for the underrated or overrated when I can just.
Get right to it, my
I
brothers.
reckon we
right
go
to it.
straight into your underrated, and then we're going to go straight into your overrated.
What both? How long am I talking for?
Oh my god, how long is the list? Jesus.
Okay,
I ain't going to talk about
A
all
short
of them.
list,
I ain't
come
going to
on.
talk about all of
again,
them.
we're not Joe Rogan. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I've only got 2 overrateds.
Okay.
But
Do your
quite a few underrateds. I'm going to stop like here
Just
because I
pick a
don't
few-
want to
pick a
go
few good
on
ones.
forever.
Pick a few or
Right,
go
I think-
through them quick.
I think The Innkeepers
Yeah.
is underrated. It's a Ty
Yeah,
West
yeah,
movie,
yeah.
same director as X and Pearl,
Okay.
and it gets no love. It doesn't get any love, even compared
Even like
to
amongst
House
his
of the
other
Devil
his
and
other
so
movies,
on.
yeah.
It doesn't get a lot of mention, and I think it should.
I think The Sacrament is even worse for that. I think it's a better movie and it's even
Do
less.
you think The
known.
Sacrament's better than The Innkeepers?
Yes.
I think they're both great.
Yeah.
But but they shouldn't be ignored. It
No,
means
no,
though
yeah,
he's
yeah.
like one of the biggest names in horror now. Nobody ever talks about The Innkeepers. It makes me sad because it's great.
Maybe we can change that by talking
Yeah.
about it now.
Well, we're talking about it now.
Yeah.
Second one is one of Dave's favorites, right? House of the Dead, 2003.
Honestly, it's a fun time.
It's a terrible movie. I should clarify. It's an absolute terrible movie. It's got bad writing, bad direction, bad acting. Everything's bad across the board. But it's just such fun. And as a child I'm not a child. When I was a child, as a child,
You got a very deep voice, Joe.
Had a big beard.
when I was a child, I played the light gun games, and as a child, I don't know whether it's a good reflection of what those games are like because I haven't played them as an adult. But when I was a child, it was like corny voice acting, pumping dance music, and kind of silly sound effects and all this kind of stuff. And it's all in House of the Dead. Uwe Boll's the great horror director, Uwe Boll, his movie. And I just think it's fun. And it's like powerfully late 90s, early 2000s, which is kind of what I have a soft spot for, even if it's rubbish. Although I have soft spots for the 70s and the 80s, etc. Anyway. Next one, The Car, 1977, which I think is one that even Dave hasn't seen. I think I might have mentioned this before.
Is it like Jewel?
Yeah, it's a bit like Jewel, Christine, that kind of movie, I guess.
Yeah.
Like there's a car, obviously.
What?
It's like in Futurama, right? When the Bender car, yeah. But yeah, it's like a ridiculously well designed, scary car. It's used in such a way that the car is actually kind of like scary and threatening, which is difficult for something with 4 wheels that you can walk into an alley and it can't get to you. But it is good, and nobody's ever seen this movie that I ever talk about. So I'm saying it's good. Saying it's good. Next one, Hardware, 1990. I'm guessing Dave hasn't seen that one either.
No, it's been on my list.
I went for real underseen ones here,
Yeah.
so yeah,
These are
you haven't got a
really
chance.
niche. No.
But I think it's like aggressively. It's set in the future, but it's like an aggressively 90s future, and I also have a soft spot for that. But good music. There's like a crazy, well-designed, really well-designed for the budget monster / machine, and that's the antagonist of the movie. And it's most of it after the first like 20 minutes is set in this apartment building where this machine's got this. I think its job is to kill one of the occupants or something, and they're just trying to deal with it. Very good, recommended. The Night Flyer, which is an underrated, underseen, nobody ever talks about it, Stephen King adaptation of a short story, I'm guessing, because I haven't read the book.
I haven't read that one.
But yeah, I mean, that circles back to me loving vampires, because I think it's one of the best versions of vampires in film, because it's called the Night Flyer because he flies his plane from airport to airport, attacks some victims, and then moves on. And I think that's brilliant. And we follow this newspaper man as he's tracking the serial killer, and he finally, gets more and more pieces to piece together that it's a supernatural thing, and it's good. I'll stop there with my...
Do you know what? I reckon whoever is listening or watching this, every time you speak,
scribbling it down,
should get a notebook or their notes up on their phone.
I can very quickly reel off the other ones.
Go on, reel off the others.
Dyatlov Pass Incident and The Borderlands. I'll pair them together because they're just great fan footage movies that not a lot of people have seen, that underrated or underseen. I'm gonna throw in the same vein as House of the Dead. Doom 2005 is just a lot of fun.
Is that the one with the Rock in?
Yeah.
I like that film.
The Rock,
especially
Dwayne
the ending is awesome.
I love that. I mean, people flame that possibly because they're big fans of the game and it's not a good game adaptation. But then again,
sorry,
big fans of the game Triple H. Yeah. I mean, Doom doesn't have a story. The original ones. Doom 3 kind of has a story, so I don't know what they're complaining about. Is what I'm saying. I think it's great.
Plus Carl Urban, man.
Yeah, Carl Urban pre-fame.
Rosamund Pike, right?
Rosamund Pike. Yeah. Your big boy Dwayne. There's other famous people in it, or pre-famous people. Yeah, it's just fun. As Above, So Below, of course.
Yes.
Which Dave hates.
What a film.
But I think
we'll be talking about it.
We think it's great.
It's a great film.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best fan footage movies of all time.
For the first time with you.
Yeah.
Kind of gave me like Tomb Raider vibes mixed with then going into
I just love that kind of style. Honestly, I love archaeological kind of stuff.
And you're completely wrong, Dave.
Tied in with horror.
I want to like it.
And it's found footage as well. I mean,
all right.
You don't want hard enough, mate.
And like the main character is like just Lara Croft.
Slow descent into hell.
He says just Lara Croft.
Just like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I misheard.
Yeah,
we weren't insulting your girl Lara.
Yeah. I would never do that.
How dare you?
It never hits it. It just never hits that point for me. It never like delivers fully on the promise. Like
I just think it's a lot of fun. You got the French guy that knows the one of my favorite lines in the movie or any movie. I can never say the line because it's never contextually relevant to any conversation, but when he's saying, I know all about the catacombs. I know the tunnels that are shut off, flooded, haunted. Just chops it into the list like it's a normal thing. Love it. I love all of the characters. I think it's slasher-esque, I guess, in the way that it's taken off one by one. I think it just follows the formula really well. It doesn't do anything special, but it does everything it does very well. And then the last one is The Village, 2004. I think just people give it a bad rap because of the twist at the end, which isn't so great, but it's not as bad as people say.
I don't actually mind the twist, honestly.
Yeah. I think it's a good...
I have never seen it.
Oh, that's one of the more famous ones you haven't seen. Yeah.
Maybe we should do an episode on that and wait for the twist.
Yeah, well,
maybe we should talk about it.
I'm not going to say what the twist is.
Okay.
Yeah. Not just for you, but for people that may or may not be listening.
The people scribbling down all the movies.
Yeah. I don't want to ruin their day. Yeah. But I think it's a really good folk horror up to a certain point, and I think it is a clever twist that they add in. It's just not handled as well as it could have done, but it doesn't make it a bad movie.
Are you ready now for the huge controversial moment with our Overrated?
I'm going again. Right.
Yeah, go again.
Right, okay.
Because then we'll do...
I'm not ready for this.
I've literally only got 2, so I don't know whether I'm going to be spicy as I could have been.
Who's going to be up in arms?
Well, I'm gonna list the movies that I thought were overrated and then watched them and liked them. Or the Vivitch or The Witch. Liked it.
So what did you think originally then? You just thought it was boring? Or?
Well, I don't know. They're all from the early 2010s, so something was going on there. Like I just didn't like.
You just
don't just a hazy period of your life.
Yeah, maybe I just watched it drunk and I wanted a slasher. Who knows?
Yeah,
but either way, I think it was good. I mean, I still don't like Eggers' other films as much as other people do. I think they're still good, Not saying that.
Oh, come on, Nosferatu, though. You got to be excited for that. Come on.
I am excited for that
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
vampires and I love
Yeah,
vampires.
yeah.
So, well, the Babadook was my other one that I was.
Oh, you like that
gonna
on the
shit
watch?
on.
Rewatch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I really going in knowing that. Have you seen that?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
To keep with the theme of the show, no.
Going in knowing what the Babadook is, being spoiler free about it, inflates or helps me to like the movie, I think. Watching it the first time, not realizing until a late-ish point, either because I was drinking or maybe I'm just stupid, but not realizing until a late point that it's kind of a metaphor.
Did you notice how neither of us jumped in and said, "No, you're not stupid"? Mike."
Finally, he admits it. Yeah. And I did have a third one, but I deleted it from the list, so it's gone.
Oh, wow.
Who knows?
Go on then. What is overrated?
My actual ones are It Follows. I rewatched it again.
Ooh.
I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it loses its way towards the end. It's a better idea. It's a better idea than it is a movie. I get what people are saying about it being very interesting in how it moves the slasher genre along. But for me, once it gets to the bit with the pool and the thing's invisible,
it is kind of goofy.
It's kind of
like,
farcical.
Throwing those like appliances in there.
Yeah,
I kind of agree with you. I do like that film. I think it's gorgeous as well.
It's
really
very well shot.
Yeah,
there's a lot of positives about it. I'm not saying it's bad.
I love
the next one's
Michael
bad,
Monroe
I
as
think,
well.
but-
Okay, lay it on us.
Yeah, Color Out of Space. I watched it again.
Oh, come on!
I watched it again. I
love
think it's
that
bad,
film.
man. I
No, it's
just
not.
don't like it.
What?
It's tonally weird, man. It's got
Exactly.
Nick Cage.
Yes.
Nick Cage is being too cagey for the movie. I love Nick Cage when he's being cagey in Vampire's Kiss and all kinds of other movies, but he's so cagey in this, and everybody else is kind of playing it straight. It's just so tonally weird. I didn't like it.
You're just describing a good movie, mate.
No.
With that description.
No, and it's over long. It's like 2 hours long. It doesn't need to be that long. And I don't like some of the effects. The more practical effects are great, but the like pink misty stuff, don't really like it. I like Tommy Chong being in there.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
He's
that.
great,
Yeah.
but just overall, I just think it's messy and I don't like it. I just don't like it, man. I tried. I rewatched it.
Have you read the story?
No, I do have a Lovecraft collection. That gap in the bookcase there is the Lovecraft collection because it's upstairs.
Oh sure, I'm really sure you have it. Yeah.
Is the book collection here with you now? But it's upstairs. That's that's in one of the collections I haven't read. But I don't know. I mean, for me, The Void and that one with Ian McKellen in.
Oh, The Keep.
The Keep.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's in my favourite subgenres. Annihilation, In the Mouth of Madness. These are all better Lovecraft adaptations for me, personally, as someone who, I haven't read that short story, but I've read a lot of Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't vibe with me, I'm afraid.
Fair.
To the point where I think it's not good.
Well, I hope that we cover it soon because I want to see what Joe thinks.
Oh,
I've not seen it.
I've got to watch it again.
Hell yeah, you do.
Well,
a few more times.
It went from a 3 to a 5 last time I rewatched it.
Out of 10?
Yeah.
Man, you just like kill your credentials, man.
It's just not good, man. It's something about it. It makes me cringe.
Right. Shall I go with mine?
Onwards.
Go for it.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
ready to be insulted or surprised.
Are we doing underrated first?
Underrated first. So underrated, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
hard agree.
100%.
I questioned putting that in, and my list was already long enough, so I didn't.
Second best Halloween movie.
But Michael Myers isn't in it.
You're right. I guess it's
They should have kept it to the original plan, where every single one, apart from the second one, was a different story.
Yeah.
Although
It was
I
an
love the
anthology
franchise,
series.
It would be better, way better.
Yeah,
still
because
agree.
then we'd have cut out the "I'm sorry, Joe" terrible Halloween sequels after 3.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I mean, honestly, it's a great film. I didn't watch it till relatively recently because it doesn't have Michael Myers in it.
Yeah.
But when I did watch it,
Well, you actively avoided it because it.
yeah, because I skipped it every time because I just wanted more Michael Myers. I did what everyone else in the world does and just kind of skip it. And there's still people. I mean, I was online and there's still people today who are still like, "Oh shit," online. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's actually a really great film. Just give it a chance. And I think that's the issue. A lot of people just don't give it a chance. But the story is really solid. The ending is great. Like the whole everything in between is
10 more days
fantastic.
till Halloween.
Yeah.
Halloween.
What
it's
a
10 out of
song.
10. Yeah. Tom Atkins is in it, who's like an underrated
Like
B-movie actor.
legends, yeah.
Yeah, he's great. Well, I say underrated in the general
Yeah,
audience.
yeah.
Everybody who knows who Tom Atkins is loves it.
Yeah.
It just hits a lot of great points, and I think because of that, it's underrated just because it is called Halloween. I reckon if it was called something else, or wasn't even involved in the Halloween franchise,
Yeah, it'd be
it would do better.
Yeah.
I agree with
done
you.
better.
Like the anthological idea, I think I'd have preferred overall.
Yeah.
But I think that Halloween 3, after the first one, is also the best Halloween movie for capturing like the feel of Halloween, the holiday. In my opinion, it feels like it's something I could watch
That's a good
every
point.
single Halloween.
Yeah.
Just like the first Halloween.
Yeah, I think it's more Halloween-y than the first one.
Yeah,
'Cause
maybe. Yeah.
Although
yeah.
it's set at Halloween and you see a lot of jack-o'-lanterns and stuff, I don't think it's capitalizing on the consumerism like the third one is. Because
Yes.
that's like a big part of what it is, and that's what a big part of Halloween has been since the 80s at least. Yeah.
And another one which we've already talked about, so we won't go on about. Not The Descent.
Yeah. Is it the Descent?
Underrated.
It's not The Descent. No.
Underrated by everyone saying it's great.
Yeah.
It's better than that, yeah.
is Threads, because it's the BBC. Because not many people have actually watched it, really.
I reckon it's definitely underseen outside of the UK.
Yeah. So I reckon, if you're out there, give that a watch.
Yeah, I've still never seen it.
Oh, what you
I've
sorry,
still never seen it.
kept quiet while we were all talking about it earlier. and
I
now
was
you're
trying to just
slipping
let it go
out.
by,
You're
but
like,
Joe had to bring it back.
Yeah.
It's really good, isn't it, Joe?
I was trying to blend in.
Oh,
We'll
man.
watch it soon.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah,
we
we
should
should-
do an episode on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like that. Yeah, I'd like to see it. Incidentally, while we're talking about the BBC, Ghostwatch, man, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Ghostwatch
that's
is
good.
great.
Isn't
Really
it? Yeah,
good,
that's
yeah.
really
There's
good.
I mean, it's not listed in my favourite subgenres because it's about 3 of them, but I wish there was more.
I would count
Ghostwatch
like
and-
kind of like found footage. I don't
Yeah.
know, like
Well,
like broadcast.
It's like
horror, let's
fake
call it
live
that.
TV,
Yeah,
basically.
like
Yeah.
Late Night with the Devil.
Yeah, and your Black Mirror live episode.
Yeah.
So finally, I left this one till last because I bet.
What are we doing? Are we doing underrated? Right?
Underrated.
Assault
Okay.
bet, right.
This is what I think is better than what the general sort of
Is this a really terrible
Spit it
movie,
out,
Joe?
come
Halloween Resurrection.
Oh, and
It's the one with Busta Rhymes.
It's more
It's
entertaining.
fantastic.
It's more entertaining than the Thorn trilogy.
you're
right?
ironically enjoying it. I have to
No,
say.
no. How
That still counts. That still counts.
Yeah, well, it definitely counts. Those
I'm
have
sorry.
to be dead, obviously.
when Busta
Yeah.
Rhymes says "trick or treat, motherfucker"
Yeah.
to Michael Myers and does kung fu on his ass, that
Doesn't he canonically kill Michael
Yes,
Myers
yeah,
in that
that's the
timeline?
end of that timeline, yeah. no,
Maybe I need to watch this movie again.
yeah,
It's so
great.
fun.
I don't remember that.
It's like early found footage, or is it like a recording?
It's like Big Brother.
Reality TV. Yeah. That's
early,
it, yeah.
early
Yeah.
reality TV, and actually, there's a guy who is interested in the woman inside the house, who's in the house, and he's like talking to her on the phone somehow, like early 2000 technology. It's kind of a little bit ahead of its time in that respect. But what I love about it is Busta Rhymes. The whole thing with where he dresses up as Michael Myers, like within the show, like showing how reality TV is kind of a setup. And part of his setup is to go in the house and dress up as Michael Myers. And he actually comes across the real Michael Myers. And he's like, I'm fucking Michael Myers. I'm playing Michael Myers. And pokes him and stuff. And the best thing about it is Michael Myers just sort of walks past him and doesn't do anything. It's like the greatest timing from this absolute boogeyman of a character who doesn't have
I feel
any
like
feelings.
I haven't seen it probably in 15 years, but I think I would enjoy it now.
And what I do agree with is that the first 15, 20 minutes is
Oh, skip it.
shockingly shit.
Skip
Well,
it.
yeah, it's when Laurie dies, right?
Yeah. But she
Yeah.
killed him in H2O.
Mm.
And they should have kept it at that and never made the movie. But since they have, if they cut out that first section, it would have been great.
It's quite interesting though, because we already talked about Scream advertising itself as being led by one actor and then subverting expectations and not being led by them. But we're chastising Resurrection for doing the same, right?
It's
Yeah,
interesting.
Dave.
It's interesting. Firstly, Scream did it first. Scream was before Resurrection, right? I think Resurrection was like
Yes, I think
2002,
so.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like the Scream version, it was meta, right? It was the actress. It was Drew Barrymore. But what you're talking about really is Laurie Strode, the character, right? That's what you're talking about, killing off a big character that is known within the franchise. It's it's not exactly the same. In my opinion,
it's a bit cheaper.
Yeah.
And I've got one more, just kind of on the fringes. I'm not sure, but Malignant, just because I'm not sure a lot of people watched it.
It's a polarizing movie, is what it is.
Is that because of your personal experience watching it?
I loved it.
Yeah,
I just thought it was incredible.
Yeah.
And the ending, the last 20 minutes, just
so fun.
Yeah, I
think
what can you say?
It's one of the most fun horror movies of recent times.
Yeah. So then, overrated picks. Dave, you're going to hate me for every single one of these picks. Dave is going to hate me for this.
Go on, just get him out.
Cabin in the Woods.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Not just Dave. Why are you hating on Cabin in the Woods, man?
Because I just didn't enjoy it all that much.
How many times have you watched it?
Just the once. Maybe that's the point.
Now I know what Dave feels like when I
we're
out of space.
I just thought the ending is shit.
Whoa, in what way?
The ending's awesome with all the different monsters coming out.
I don't like monsters.
You get to see the merman.
I'm not a monster person.
And all of the references, every single monster was a reference.
Yeah, the Hellraiser and all the kinds. You haven't watched enough. I'm going to gatekeep it.
I'm
going to gatekeep you. You're not knowledge enough about horror to
I just watched it and I thought it was a bit. It's okay. I didn't get what the hype was. Because you've been hyping it forever, so I watched it and I just
maybe it was overhyped.
Perhaps it's the overhype.
Maybe
it's Dave's fault.
I think you should maybe watch it again. And look out for the way that they satirize all the tropes, how the quote unquote horny blonde isn't actually blonde, and they pump gas to make her act dumb because she's not dumb. She's a medical student, and the jock, I think he's a medical student as well. But they pump gas into the place to make them conform to the stereotypes, right, which is part of the ritual. Honestly, I think if you watched it again, you might like it.
Maybe.
I'd put it up there with Scream in terms of meta horror.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
A successul concept that you can make a movie out of.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's carry on.
After that spiciest take
because
so
you
far.
just said that.
Are you going to say Scream?
No, I'm going to say meta horror movies in general.
What?
Okay, like what?
But Scream is one of those.
Yeah.
Because not the originals and not anything of that start era, but don't look at me like that.
You just hate the
radio where
silence.
It's gone.
Yeah.
I hate where meta has gone because everyone now does it and they think they're so fucking cool for doing it. And that's what bugs me with it, is that everyone now does it in the sense that, it's a horror movie within a horror movie. It's, look at this. Oh, this is the stereotypical character. Yeah, we're going to do it anyway because we're in on it too. And I'm like, go away. It does my head in. So which leads me on to the last one.
Just to say, I can agree with that to a certain extent because after Scream 1 came out, in a similar manner to how people copied Halloween and Friday the 13th, they copied Scream. And there was a lot of bad kind of teen horror movies and meta commentary horror movies. And it did a lot of damage, mate. It led to a dark time in the late 90s. Yeah.
And so the last one is the entirety of the modern Scream franchise. Anything after 3...
Radio silence. Oh, 4 as well.
Anything after 3 does my head.
You don't like 4?
Nope.
I agree for after 4. But I like 4.
4's okay, but the others are just drizzling shits to me. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. 3's probably the weakest, but actually I quite enjoy that one.
3's interesting.
I like
being
3.
produced by the Weinsteins, right? That's interesting. Yeah.
But then 4 is okay, but I reckon they should have never just gone back to it. I reckon they should have just left it because it was a classic trio of movies. They just shouldn't have done. And this is a problem with me with a lot of modern cinema in general, is that I start to get really annoyed at it because there's nothing original anymore. Everything has to be regurgitated.
They definitely try to be original. I'm not saying it's wholly successful.
But this is my issue with it.
Not the latest one, but the one before when they were doing... They kind of invented a word or popularized a word, right?
No.
Like the remake.
I hate that. A recall.
Recall,
yeah.
The recall can go to
I think that's kind of a cool idea.
That did catch on. Yeah. People that caught on. People used that.
People did it, and it disgusted me that people were talking about it. I really hated that.
Sure, you're not being old man.
Yeah,
but it's just that we're so smart and you're not type deal, which annoyed me.
I don't
about
think
it.
it's pretentious though. That's what you're kind of arguing, right?
I think it is a bit
It's not like
pretentious.
at the audience's expense.
Because the issue I have with these, especially these last two Scream films, is that they are ham-fisting it. They are forcing in what the originals did so well. They're forcing in this. These are the rules of horror, but these are the modern rules of horror. But it's such a more forced way of doing it, where it felt so natural and like, oh, no one's done that before. This time round for me, I just watched them and I went, ugh. And they kind of subverted me in the worst way by killing off one of the trio. And that turned me off it completely. I was like, the whole point was that they all survive, right? They all survive.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be about breaking the rules, right?
Ugh.
I think that's a good idea.
You can't keep them alive forever.
This is why they should have stopped.
Otherwise, you end up with Walking Dead, right? Where
True.
you just introduce characters to
and
die
they should have
over and
ended
over
that
again.
years before it did. This is another
I
issue.
put it to you that you might have liked those movies if they weren't Scream movies, if they were just standalone
Potentially,
movies.
but because they have the Scream name on it and they soil the name of Scream, to me, a lot of people came out enjoying it.
Crazy talk from the man that doesn't think Halloween 6 soils the name of Halloween.
No, because Halloween was dead long before.
So Scream 11 will be great because the name's already been soiled.
They should just leave Scream. They should leave Scream alone. I just think Scream was so good. Halloween, I
kind of agree that now that Wes Craven is dead, they should stop making Scream movies.
But anyway, that's my very hot take of this one. But I just, those modern ones I went to see, I mean, the one, number 4 wasn't so bad, really.
I can't believe you're including 4 in this. Like, I mean, that
I
was
need to rewatch it anyway, but...
I mean, 4 was Craven himself. That was all Craven.
And it was pretty ahead of its time, actually, when you watch it now.
All right, I might watch it again, but I just think they should have perhaps just left it 1, 2, and 3 and just stopped there, because I just think you can't beat that as a trio.
I think 4 is better than 3.
Yeah.
And I might even put it above 2, honestly.
Sometimes I
think 4
4
is
above
great.
2. The problem with 4 has my second favourite opening. I love that like fake out opening. I like the killer reveal.
I like the new cast members.
Yes. Actually, it's very...
And the way they gel with the old
But
ones.
I absolutely hate the way it's shot, or whatever camera lens they're using. Honestly, if you watch 1, 2, 3 and go on to 4... It's so horrible. Like, it looks
Maybe
really
that's
bad.
what I did with my last watch, because I do remember actually enjoying Scream 4 when I originally watched it.
Yeah.
And I watched it again straight after.
It looks like cheap. It looks really bad. I don't know exactly
from early digital
probably
photography?
digital, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 2011, right? I think so. Yeah, probably.
So anyway, 5 and 6 potentially, maybe not 4. Who knows? I will have to watch it again. But 5 and 6, I could live without ever watching them ever again. To be quite honest,
I wouldn't be that strong about it, but they're obviously the weakest of the franchise.
I didn't enjoy watching them, and I was just like,
I think there's good stuff to find in there.
It's just that I think I'm just done with meta. I think that's what it is. Meta is so like everyone thinks they're so original.
Just makes me sad that you're throwing Cabin in the Woods in there.
Well, maybe I'll rewatch that and like that too.
Yeah.
However, I just remember watching it and going, didn't actually do as much for me as what everyone else is saying.
I mean, opinions are opinions.
Yeah, man.
And I think that's what this is all about.
Except for my facts about Color Out of Space. Yeah.
No opinions from Mike. Only facts.
Only facts.
Okay, what have I got? What are we doing? Overrated first or underrated?
Underrated first. Spices last.
Okay. No particular order. Exorcist 3.
Nothing.
Underrated. This is.
Yes, underrated. Yeah. Underrated. Exorcist.
I love
3.
Exorcist 3.
Yeah,
Exorcist
bad
3
than the
is
original.
amazing.
Yeah.
Whoa.
No, it is. It is.
There was such agreement.
You can't just whiplash me like that. Get me accidentally agreeing to better than the original.
I heard agreement from you.
I mean, Exorcist 3.
Sounds like Mike agrees. Moving on.
Exorcist 3 is brilliant. It's brilliant. It's easily the second best, but it's not better than the Exorcist. The first one.
This is the one.
Yeah, the Exorcist one. You want to go see Exorcist one?
Okay, it's a taste thing. Like I prefer like crime procedurals, like I say, to like possession movies. Just the way it is. Don't watch the director's cut of Exorcist 3 though. Have you seen it?
No, I don't think so.
I got I think it's like an Arrow Blu-ray. And they've got like a VHS copy, and they've like spliced in the deleted scenes from VHS.
So the quality.
Yeah. So like that, which is cool. I like that. But the ending sucks. So like instead of the whole thing where they have the exorcism at the end. Like the main guy, I forgot the actor now, but he just goes to the possessed guy and just shoots him.
Okay.
Yeah, just shoots him, and that's the end of the movie. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
What else I got here? The People Under the Stairs.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
really
need to
good.
rewatch that.
Yeah.
I don't remember it very well.
It's a Wes Craven
liking it.
early
Yeah.
early 90s.
It's
Yeah, like
an underseen movie.
Yes,
Yeah.
underseen. Yeah, a lot of these are actually underseen. It's about like people break into a rich house and basically get more than they bargained for. It's like that kind of thing.
Okay.
It's a bit like Don't Breathe.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've seen Twin Peaks, but like two of the actors from Twin Peaks are in it, right? Which is
Don't
I've
spoil
only seen
Twin
the first
Peaks
season.
for me.
Oh, no,
because
no.
I'm actually watching my way through
Oh,
Twin
are you?
Peaks.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't have put this on here a few months ago, but 30 Days of Night, amazing movie.
See, I need to rewatch that because I suspect it would be on my list if I rewatched it, or it'd be on the other list. I wasn't confident enough to put it on either. I just thought it was fine.
It's really good, and like I remember like disliking it. In fact, I remember disliking
vampires as
vampire
well,
movies.
right?
Yeah,
So
but I
should
thought
like
I
it,
didn't like
yeah.
vampire movies, but I think I do. But it's really good. It's very brutal. It's kind of like a vampire movie through the lens of like 28 Days Later. Danny Houston is amazing, very intimidating. Yeah, it's really good, and the isolated setting as well. So they're in Alaska, I think, like the northernmost
Of America.
like town in Alaska. And I think they hit winter, and it basically enter a period where they don't get daylight for 30 days, and the town kind of shuts.
Which is a real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people like they have to leave the town, but the people that stay is like a reduced like population. Then like this just wandering band of vampires just stumble in and they just go to town, and it's really cool. It's very violent. There's a really cool shot, like overhead shot that like tracks vampires, and they're just kind of running here and killing people, and there's blood, and it's like a long take, the overhead take. It's really cool.
Yeah. Do need to rewatch.
Yeah, like.
I'm just gonna say I've just remembered that AVP exists, and that should be in the underrated.
No, you had your turn, and we're not talking about AVP.
Is that Alien versus Predator?
Yeah.
Oh god.
I just wanted to slip that in there.
Okay.
Carry on. Yeah.
Okay, here's one that I think you've seen, Joe. House of Wax remake
Interesting.
with Paris Hilton and
It's supposed to be kind of like an
maybe?
ironical.
is it Elisha Cuthbert, right? Is
She
she in the lead of that?
Oh, well, it's been a while.
I do
Yeah.
like her.
Yeah,
Paris
yeah.
Hilton's
in it,
Kim
right?
Bauer.
Yeah, Paris Hilton's in it.
Yeah.
I was so sad when she went in her death scene, incidentally. But that's it's really good. Like it's very mid 2000s. It's very of its time. Like you can literally just like imagine like the kind of like that like mid 2000s like shit rock that plays. It's like a Saw movie. You know what I mean? But really cool, really creepy. Like I love the setting. Like the wax house that they go through, and then when it all catches fire, it's really cool.
Have you seen the original?
I have, but I don't remember it very well. It was really good, but I just don't remember it very well.
Yeah. See, I watched it without having seen the original. I don't know whether that would affect anything. I think I watched it when I was probably like 13.
No, I watched
old,
it.
actually.
Yeah, I watched it before.
But did it
seeing
come out
the original,
2005,
4, something like that? Yeah.
And I may have actually been 11 or
Yeah,
10 the last time I watched it. Yeah.
Another one, not so much underrated, it's just unknown. Behind the Mask, Leslie Vernon.
Yep, brilliant.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly
I've
agree.
seen that one.
Yeah. So that's a is it found footage at the beginning or the end? It's a mockumentary, right?
It's a mockumentary all the way
through. And then it begins as a mockumentary when they're like a documentary crew interviewing like some guy who wants to be the next big name in slasher killings, right? So it's a universe where like Michael Myers is real,
that's a
Jason's
genius.
real. It's
meta
really cool.
horror.
Yeah.
When he's talking about how he needs to practice walking as fast as people run and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. He had like doing like workouts and things.
And
he's like
in
all the
universe,
preparation in the location as well, like setting up all the traps and everything.
Yeah, and in the universe of the movie, Freddy Krueger and
they're
Michael
all
Myers, and
real,
they're
aren't
all
they?
real.
Yeah. He wants to be like the
characters,
next
and he
one.
wants to,
yeah, really cool. The next one is A Cure for Wellness, which you may not have heard of. That's a
movie, extremely well shot movie.
Yeah. That's Gore Verbinski, like the guy that did the Ring remake and the Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know how many of those he did, but he did some of them.
Right. If he did the first one, then
he definitely did the first one.
That's a great film.
Yeah.
I know that.
Well,
the rest not so much.
The Ring remake is amazing, but I think A Cure for Wellness, like people just don't know it. It's quite long. It's quite slow.
It's very long.
It's actually one of Mia Goth's like first movies.
Really?
Yeah. I think the main problem with it is the lead. Like, he's just not very charismatic. But he goes, he's like a young guy, and he has to go to like a remote wellness retreat in the Swiss Alps to bring back the CEO of his company or something. He's trapped there, and there's kind of a mystery, and he starts to doubt his own sanity. Mia Goth's hanging around. It's very cool.
Trying to make me watch
I hope that we cover it. Well, you should watch it.
Yeah.
My final one, Overlord. Again, not underrated, but just unknown. Like war horror. Have you seen this?
No. I haven't.
World War II. They're like a paratroop unit, right? I think. Kurt Russell's son's in it, and they land and they go to like a French town, and there's like the classic like evil, like castle on the hill, and they're doing like Nazi experiments in there, and they go in and it goes nuts, and it's really, really cool, very like violent, and they keep the war aesthetic throughout as well, which I like. So it's not a war movie that becomes a horror movie but then loses the war aesthetic.
It's not like From Dusk Till Dawn.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the transition to horror is a surprise. Like, I noticed on my Netflix that my dad started watching Overlord, right? He loves war films, hates horror movies. And he stopped watching Dead on in the Middle. And probably as soon as the first kill happens, because it's really gory. But yeah, like, it doesn't like change to horror completely. They kind of keep the war. So it's really cool. Yeah, I hope we get to it at some
interestingly, you remember ages ago you talked about Frankenstein's Army?
Oh, yeah.
Which is a war. This like Red Army soldiers stumble on like machine type monster Nazis. Very similar to that. I think you'd like it.
Yeah. It's been on my list for a while. I think it's found footage too, right?
Yeah, it's fan footage. I mean, the star of the show is the like design of the machines and the monsters.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Overrated. We talked about some of these already, so I got Halloween already, which we spoke about.
Terrible take. How dare you?
We've already spoken about
How very dare
but I'm
you.
still incensed.
Yeah.
Well, we're moving on.
I still got words.
Exorcist 1, overrated.
Whoa.
Overrated. No.
A lot of people out there.
Okay,
this
overrated.
is their top horror list.
Great. Great. No, that's great.
This is like the best classics.
Okay, overrated doesn't
Psycho
necessarily mean bad. Overrated doesn't mean bad. Like, it's good. It's just like not my favorite. Like, it's got like an 8 on IMDb or something. Like, people say it's the best horror movie ever made. I don't think so.
I
don't think it's the best horror
don't
movie
agree
ever made.
with Halloween, but I can certainly kind of agree with Exorcist. But that's just because I don't really
It's a
like
good
the
movie.
genre.
It's a good movie.
Personally, I don't think
I prefer Halloween to Exorcist.
People always say it's. Well, I say people. Some people say it's the best horror movie of all time.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, you hear that all the time.
It's not The Descent.
No, the true best horror movie of all time. Yeah,
it's like the Shawshank Redemption being at the top of the IMDb list. Not because it's the best, but because everybody agrees it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, and here we go. Jeepers Creepers.
Like, it's overrated.
Overrated, mate. Overrated.
I mean, I would argue a lot of people attack it.
Yeah.
I think people like it. Like, people like it. I don't think it deserves to be that liked.
You've never liked Jeepers
No,
Creepers.
not really. And I've watched it. I want to like it. I have been waiting. This whole time to talk about it because I have things to say.
I think Jeepers Creepers is great.
Jeepers Creepers is...
I did watch it as a kid.
Especially the first half is great.
Did you know that the first half is... This is not confirmed, but it's basically ripping off a Unsolved Mysteries episode.
Okay. What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it. But
isn't Unsolved Mysteries a documentary?
Yeah, it's true. It's true crime. Like the story. The story is basically real.
Mean, like, that's like saying Psycho's ripping off.
No, yeah. No, but like the filming, like the actual sequence of events, is exactly like how it's presented in the episode.
Interesting.
Yeah. I like the opening.
So in real life,
I like the opening.
Flying.
It was. It actually was. Yeah, it was a giant bat creature in real life. Yeah. He took that idea.
Can't believe I missed that.
What else then, Dave? Come on.
What?
Spit it out. What else about
overrated?
Jeepers Creepers?
Well, I just like. You're
not going to attack Justin Long, are you? I love Justin.
I like Justin Long. I like Justin Long. Hey, Scream King, mate. Scream King.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably number one Scream King for sure. Like, I like the first half. I like the opening sequence a lot. And I don't particularly have a problem with it like being inspired by a true crime story either. I mean, most horror movies are. it fizzles out in the second half. I think you agree, right? Like once he kind of like reveals himself.
Not as the monster isn't as good as.
He's way cooler when he's like a shadowy guy in a van that's chasing them.
Yeah, when it's more realistic, a bit like
when it's more like
Wolf
a true
Creek
crime story.
Well, more like that sort of Wolf Creek character.
Mick Taylor.
The Mick Taylor.
I think personally, it balances it quite well because it moves from horror to not so much of a horror tone. Not to the extent of Jeepers Creepers 2, but I think it turns into a creature feature and takes the tone of a creature feature after the reveal, I would argue.
I guess the issue I've got with it is the model isn't my favourite, and I'd look at it and go, okay. All right, it's not. It underwhelms me.
The fold-out face that they robbed from Predator.
That bit underwhelms me, I guess. I mean, I love the concept of him only appearing once every, was it 26, something like that. 26 years or something?
That's cool, yeah.
And I'm like, and that used to petrify me.
That's just
as
like
a
Pennywise, right? In it.
Yeah. I feel like that's the trope in it. A trope in
itself.
It must be like earlier examples. Yeah.
Oh, but that's my list for Overrated, Underrated.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's some real hot takes in that. I feel like you played it safer than us two.
Well, I rewatched mine. I was a good boy. I was trying to be a good boy.
No. You should have said wild, unfounded claims about movies.
The Vivitch is a piece of shit. Like
Babadook,
anybody that likes it is a piece of garbage. Morons. Yeah.
Right, let's take 5.
I need a piss.
All right then, Mike. So we're going to go to favourite sub-genres of horror. Famously, a lot of them. So what are your top 5?
Famously, a lot of them. Yeah. Well, the first one is vampires, which I think I already mentioned earlier. Yeah. So I don't know whether I need to extrapolate, but I've seen I haven't seen all of them because I know there's hundreds, but I've seen, I don't know, more than 12, more than 20 Dracula adaptations.
I lived with you and I never realised how much you were into vampires.
I love vampires.
Do you love vampires or do you love Dracula?
Well, Dracula the book is one of my favourites.
So what about Twilight?
We'll get to that, mate, because we'll get to that in the least favourite subgenre section.
Okay. How is that a horror genre?
Sir.
Well, it's in the bracket of teen horror, mate. We'll get to it, mate. Stop rushing me along. I'm talking about horror. Dracula over here, my boy.
There's no horror, teen horror.
Anyway, number 2.
Yes, it is a teen horror. It's a horror for teens. Horror,
get on with your list, mate.
Well, yes, okay. We've talked about the vampires, mate. But yes, there's some Nosferatu, and there's a lot of underrated Dracula adaptations that people don't talk about, which I could have put in my underrateds and didn't. So next one is Slasher, which we could have all probably presumed, and we've probably all got that in our tops, I would imagine. Better not be in the least favourite.
We'll see.
Disgusting me. But yeah, I think it's the most easy to watch of all the subgenres because it always follows. Well, not always, but most of the time it follows a subgenre that follows the formula of the subgenre, and you can just sit back, relax, probably tune out a little bit if it's a particularly garbage one, waiting for the next kill, and I don't know, they're just endlessly entertaining background fillers. My version of reality TV, I imagine. So. My next one is kind of an offshoot of that, with the Giallo movies from Italy that I don't know whether you even know what they are.
I've never heard of that in my life.
You watch *Malignant* though, which is kind of like
is that kind of like
and Maxine as well. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, they're basically Italian, late mid 60s till about mid 70s, I'd say. They're always characterized by awesome music in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah.
Particularly by Goblin.
Basically, from one band.
Yeah.
They all have the same band,
yeah. But they had Sergio Leone did of like Good, the Bad and the Ugly fame.
And
did a lot of the soundtracks. Yeah. Did a lot of the soundtracks of the Giallos.
Oh no, that was Ennio Morricone. Never mind.
That's actually what I meant. Sergio Leone is the director. I meant Ennio Morricone. Yeah. God damn it. But yeah.
This is your expert, though.
Yes. He's easily confused. With that, so they always follow a similar thing. There's like black gloves on the killer. It's a mystery kind of Hitchcock-esque suspense movie mystery underpinned by slasher style.
Very
murders.
Like vibrant colours, like vibrant like red blood, right?
Yeah. They're often kind of psychedelic, even with their use of colours. They're often quite sexy and transgressive for the early 70s. and definitely when you go back to the earlier ones, when we didn't even have slashers yet. Obviously, we had Psycho and Peeping Tom, but they were extremely violent for the time and bloody, and I love that. My next one is found footage, which is what we've already discussed as well. In a similar way to slasher, they follow a certain formula, not as strictly as slashers do, but I just love the POV camera. I think it elevates what is typically probably a low budget monster or low budget threat to being scarier than it would be if it wasn't found footage.
Honestly,
I would imagine it hides problems with the production in terms of budget, and that's why I think I like a lot of them, because if they do it smartly, you can have barely any budget at all and barely any of a script at all. You know, it's just people screaming and running around, and I'm down with that. So
honestly, like, I mean, what you're saying about the budget is right. I find it amazing how they make them, and I think that people that are familiar with like the filmmaking process can like see like the string and duct tape keeping it all together. But I find it like so engaging. You feel like you're right there with real people, and it, like found footage elevates what would potentially be otherwise quite a mediocre movie, right? Like it doesn't have to be very good in any other aspect, but it's so immediately engaging. It's like it's adrenaline, or like a roller coaster.
It's the same way that a horror game often is scarier than a horror movie, because the more you can insert yourself or your own perspective, or share the perspective of the protagonist in the horror movie, the more you're likely to be influenced by it in a scary way. So I think it's just an effective tactic, and it's like a perfect thing for an indie horror movie, and therefore there's loads and loads and loads of them, and I like that there's loads and loads and loads of them. Yeah. Adventure / archaeology horror, which is just
come on, that's not a genre.
Invented subgenre
for one movie. Come on,
no, because I knew.
Don't put the pyramid. Don't say the pyramid.
I knew that you were going to come out here and say that's not a genre, Mike. What are you talking about? You're chatting shit. You just want to talk about As Above, So Below.
Again.
So,
and he's right. No, I agree with you.
No, because I put here, The Mummy is an adventure archaeology horror, and that's brilliant. You're about to...
You're stretching the... horror.
Deep Rising is one of those by the same director. Stephen Sommers has like kind of a adventure horror thing. I'm carrying on, mate. Indiana Jones, the first one. It has horror elements. It's horror adjacent.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
These aren't Mike Rogers genres. These don't have to be actual genres.
Just bear with me. It's a real genre.
Indiana Jones is not a horror movie.
Do you remember that one episode of Dora the Explorer? Oh my god.
Terrifying.
If she's on an adventure and she's digging in the ground and she finds something scary, then I'd like
it. It's a horror film.
Or digging in the ocean.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Any kind of digging, man. Dig in wherever
You're
you
digging.
find something scary. No, I'm digging out a new genre, man. I'm digging out a new subgenre that everybody's going to be like, oh, have you seen that new archaeology horror, that adventure horror? Bloody good, man. Yeah. And the last one is sci-fi horror, which is a real genre.
That's more like it.
Unlike the underrated genre, it should have been in my underrated section. Underrated genre, unseen genre, archaeological horror.
Well, it's seen by you, apparently.
Yeah, I'd seek them out, man. If it was such a tag on IMDb or Letterboxd, I'd be watching all of them. I wish it was. But yeah, sci-fi horror, you got your aliens, it invites like a certain level of creativity, not just in the design of the monster / alien, but in the setting itself. It's a marrying of two things I like. I'd say sci-fi is probably my favorite after horror, and it means that you can set yourself in a far future and add a horror element of unknown origin. It's such a free form. You're not set into a formula. I don't think with sci-fi horror. I think it's fun. Yeah,
it can pair well with like body horror and stuff as well, right? Like it doesn't have to just be like a killer alien or something. Most Cronenberg movies.
It's a subgenre that invites, I think, practical effects.
Yeah.
Just like body horror does, and I love those. Yeah, body horror goes almost hand in hand, really.
Yeah.
a lot of the time it's kind of aliens or it's kind of extraterrestrial stuff going on in a body horror, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Go on then. Overrated subgenres.
Well, exorcism / possession movies, because I think other than The Exorcist 1, which is better than Exorcist 3.
No, it's not.
Well, it just is. It just
No, it's
is.
not.
Go on.
How great's Exorcist 2, mate? Is that better than the
What's
first
wrong
one?
with the possession movie, though? I enjoy a good possession movie.
I think that The Exorcist is the best one, and everything after that is just doing The Exorcist but worse, in my opinion. I'm not saying they're all bad. There are some good ones, but as a whole, if I was to, when we're going to Fright Fest, right? If I walked into a movie that I didn't know what I was going to see, and it was an exorcism movie, I'd audibly sigh probably, because I know almost, unless it's something standout, I know exactly what the movie's going to be like.
Yeah, but you said that for slashers and loved it for being formulaic.
Yeah, but I don't like the formula with Exorcist movies. A good example of that would be the newest Exorcist movie, Exorcist Believer. The first half of the movie is not really about exorcisms at all. It's a cop or whatever. I can't really remember. It wasn't great, but it was better than the second half because it wasn't formulaic. They were somewhat doing something interesting with the possession dynamic. But then as soon as it was people gathering around, reading from the Power of Christ Compels You, throw the holy water, just la 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 la, yeah.
No, get out.
It's all the same song. It's the same song and dance every single time.
Yeah,
and
but so is I've already. Great.
Yeah, but there's varieties of kills in slashers, right? There's varieties of the design of the killer or the motivations of the killer. In Exorcist movies, it's always a demon, and they always just want to wreck shit. That's their thing. So,
no, but it doesn't have to be formulaic. I think I have exorcism and possession on my list as well. But what about
the least favorite?
Yeah, for least favorite. Yeah. But like, I think it is possible to work within that genre and do something new. Like, I thought Talk to Me, I think it was last year.
Yeah,
was amazing.
I think that is really brilliant.
Good.
Yeah,
it was probably the best horror movie last year.
I would say, I think I did say that there are some movies that book that trend, but as a whole, as I'm going to say with the next one, there's just such a swathe of like uninspired movies in the subgenre that I just don't like.
Yeah.
Go on, keep going. Next one.
The next one is zombies, mate, and you might object to that because you said that you like zombies quite a lot in your 28 Days Later. Yeah. But I think that's less of a problem with the formula, like with exorcism movies. That's more of a problem with it just being bloated with thousands and thousands and thousands of bad, cheap to make, easy to plot, dystopian, apocalyptic zombie movies that I just don't care about. They're all kind of the same, and they all bore me to death. There are obviously lots of great zombie horror movies. It's not like exorcism movies where I'm saying The Exorcist stands above the pack. There's a lot of good zombie movies, but I think because there's so many zombie movies, if I see a movie's got zombies in it, I'm gonna think it's in the 98% that are bad. So I've only got two more with this one. I'm not going to go on for crazy. The next one is my teen / horror romance, which Dave is saying isn't a genre.
It's such bullshit.
Teen horror,
like romance horror, sure I can accept, but like teen horror.
No, because they're constrained by the PG-13 and they rob you.
Hey, PG-13 horror can be good. That's
I know, because Scream exists and
that's R-rated. But like The Ring.
Oh, is it?
Drag Me to Hell.
So-called expert once again.
Yeah.
But well, Drag Me to Hell is great.
Yeah.
But like those aren't. I think those are PG-13 movies to expose themselves to a wider audience. They're not specifically targeted
cowardly.
At teens.
Well, I mean,
right? Because I watched the Covenant, which is a bit like the. I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, it's a 2003 movie where they're all at a university and there's some romantic love interests going on, and there's one of them's a vampire and he's got special abilities, and I just don't like it. It's just a lot of sighing me about these subgenres. But there are movies that push the PG-13 rating and are good, and there are movies that are aimed at teens which are also horror and good. But I don't like the fact, because I love vampires so much. People
destroyed vampires.
When I say I like vampire movies, people either mockingly or seriously think, "Oh, you must like the Twilight."
Big
movies.
old Twilight fanboy.
Whereas I do kind of, ironically, but like the first one, and unironically like one of the latter ones.
The third one, mate. That's the only good one.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
It's
that's
amazing. Directed by
good.
David Slade, who did like Hard Candy and that Dark Harvest movie.
Yeah. Do like those.
Yeah.
Do like those. And then my last one is police procedural horror. Not a big fan of that. Again, because it was not so much anymore, but it was a dime a dozen. There was a lot of those. And it's a perspective we've seen so many times in horror movies that it becomes stale for me. There are good examples of that, obviously, as there are with all of these. But I just don't find it that interesting. Not every police procedural movie can be Silence of the Lambs, and almost none of them are. Yeah.
Awesome. Shall I do mine?
Yes.
Which is probably a bit more basic than yours.
Well, at least you can have real genres, I hope.
I reckon I do. I reckon so. Okay, favourite subgenres. You're going to hate me for this. Number 5, demonic possession movies. I love them.
Give me some good ones then that aren't The Exorcist.
I think I love, I would have agreed with you till almost quite recently, till I watched The Conjuring and those types, because I actually really enjoyed what The Conjuring did with it. And I was actually in the cinema going, oh, this is actually quite scary. I wasn't expecting it to be like this. I only went on a whim because I had a Odeon Limitless card. I was just like, oh, I'll go and see it because it's on. And I did, and I was like, oh, actually, I really enjoy this.
See, I don't really like The Conjuring. It probably should have been my overrated, but
oh no!
But
I
don't
completely
think
disagree.
I don't think it's bad. I just think it's not as good as other people say, and I think Conjuring 2 is better personally.
I think
Conjuring 2 is really good.
I think 2 is better as well. I like Insidious though better than The Conjuring. So.
And
I like Insidious better than Conjuring 1. But not 2.
I prefer the Conjuring series to the Insidious series, but I still like Insidious.
Yeah. Well,
I've not got anything against it.
The first 2/3 of Insidious are better than all of the Conjurings, but I don't like it after
the first Insidious. I think we went to the cinema when we were like 18.
Yeah, I can't remember actually seeing that at the cinema.
And it was fantastic. It felt very different to what I'd seen for a long time.
Yeah.
But no, I just enjoy. I don't know what it is. It's something about those possession movies, you kind of know what you're getting in a way, and I have no issue with that. And I also think it's a really nice way for a lot of casual people who don't necessarily get into the horror world that often. You'll see a lot of couples go in and things like that.
See, another thing I would say that I didn't say is that there is a propensity for jump scares with exorcism movies.
I don't think that's jump scares are necessarily a bad thing though.
Yeah, well, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not really talking about their presence, but the overuse of them, I think, is a problem for me.
But anyway, we'll have to agree to disagree with.
Well, yeah, that's the point.
Paranormal ones. So number 4, comedy horror. I love a good comedy horror.
Yeah.
Which ones are your favourite?
Oh, Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
Perhaps something like Shaun of the Dead for me is right up there.
Yeah.
I'd
argue Shaun of the Dead and Evil Dead 2 are like cream of the crop of comedy horror. Yeah.
And Tucker and Dale.
Oh yeah, Tucker and Dale.
Tucker and Dale was brilliant
as well.
Just ride into the wood chipper.
Yeah. So I just enjoy it, and they're easy to pick up and watch. And again, they're just fun. They're fun. They're fun watches. Really, I don't have any issue.
Yeah,
with them.
I'd agree.
They're easy to watch. I know. Again, it's another genre that perhaps opens up the horror world to people who don't necessarily always watch horror. I know, like my mom and her partner, they love Shaun of the Dead. They just like watch it all the time. If it's on, they're like, "Hey, Shaun of the Dead's on." So
it does deserve a lot of respect for that, because a lot of people that like point blank won't watch horror movies. I know that if I wanted to watch a horror movie with them, I could suggest a comedy horror because it's not scary. It's not built to be scary, and that's what they don't like about horror movies. So
that's it.
Another interesting thing about comedy horror, is that both those genres separately are very kind of subjective and personal, right? They're almost two sides of the same coin, comedy and horror, and you can get wildly different opinions on a movie based on that, based on your taste. And what you're, especially like black comedies as well, like very dark comedies that have horror elements in them. Like it might work for someone and then just not work for someone else. I find that very interesting. Like those two genres, especially, just being paired together.
They do blend quite well because even in films that aren't necessarily meant to be comedic all the way through, like the scene in X where Pearl shoots the shotgun. I was in the cinema watching it. I laughed out loud when she shot the shotgun and just went flying backwards because actually, like, I've not really ever seen that. Like, that's quite funny. Like to see something like that happen, and you're like not expecting it.
Well, yeah.
Some people might not find that so funny, but I actually
we're due to watch Midsummer at some point and talk about it, right?
Yeah.
But like, there's scenes in that where the guy's tripping and he's saying, "Everybody lie down with me."
Yeah,
I mean, that's so.
And there's also the bit where the woman comes in and says, "We're all watching Austin Powers."
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So I think a lot of very somewhat serious or very serious horror movies inject these bits of comedy in them to lighten the mood, to bring you up before they they shock
break you back down.
Yeah.
So next one, found footage.
Yeah,
we've already talked
hard
about
agree.
it.
Apparently, it's not in Dave's.
No, but I couldn't make it.
Oh, it might be.
I couldn't say it any better than what you've said it, really. So I'll leave it at that. I just enjoy them. Even it's these days not as popular, but I really do like Blair Witch. I do enjoy Blair Witch for its kind of cheapness in a way, but also that sometimes you don't necessarily have to see the horror or what it is. It's the thought of it being there is sometimes as horrific as an actual thing. And I enjoyed that about it. It kind of subverted my expectations in a way by doing that, because they don't really show anything, but it's implied within it. And I really enjoy that element, that psychological element to it.
Yeah, and it was marketed brilliantly as like a real thing and stuff. Like I wish I was there.
And you can with found
'99
footage, right? You can kind of do that with found footage.
It invites
films.
that.
You can feel that you can pull the audience right into the scenario.
Even Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of does it, like with the where they
it's like voyeuristic,
things like that.
Like in that, you feel like you're looking at something that you're not supposed to be looking at. That Cannibal Holocaust as well, amazing found footage.
Basically,
from, like,
the progenitor of found footage. Underrated movie because people don't watch it because it's supposed to be like too hardcore or whatever, but I think that's an absolutely brilliant movie.
It is really good. If it wasn't for the actual animal deaths,
which is unfortunate.
Actually, there was actual animal deaths in it.
Yeah. I mean, they should. I don't know why there isn't a cut. Maybe there is a cut with those removed because they don't really add anything to it.
Was it done like purposefully or by accident?
There's like a sea turtle, like a giant turtle.
Yeah, they cut it up. They cut up a turtle.
Yeah. Well, they actually did that
with a machete.
Yeah. Well, it's 1980.
So, so on that pleasant note, number 2, a psychological horror film. I enjoy psychological horror. There's just something sometimes about it that you kind of even those you were saying earlier, maybe those old Hitchcock films used to be horror.
Yeah,
maybe they still are.
I'd still call them horror. Yeah, they call them suspense, or you could call them psychological horror, psychological thriller.
And do you reckon something like The Shining is within that bracket at all? A little bit. What would you say?
I mean, how would you personally define psychological horror? Because it's kind of hard.
It's hard to define, isn't it? Yeah, you can't really pin it down.
Because there's a certain
everything
amount
is
of movies that are thrillers that you could say are psychological horrors. Yeah.
But I reckon I need to come back to that, and because I would have thought of a movie at the time and went, "Yeah, that's a psychological horror."
Yeah, you know when you see it. Like, do you think it's like a requirement that like the mental state of the characters is kind of part of the plot? Would you say, or?
Yeah, and I guess it has to play on the mind of the watcher in a way as well. In a certain way, there's something that they do.
I don't know. Should the protagonist be of clear mind? Because if they're not of clear mind, then what you're presented with as the audience could be supernatural horror, even if it's playing out in the protagonist's mind, right? So the Babadook, right? That's a personification of something in her mind, but it's a supernatural horror. So I think to a certain extent you need a straight person.
Well,
it's okay. You can say it.
Well, I don't know.
You're off the podcast. Fuck off.
Cancel. But you need a by the numbers protagonist maybe to make it psychological.
Well, you don't think that the Babadook is a psychological horror? I think it is. The supernatural is
the beauty.
It's so secondary, the supernatural elements, in my opinion.
But the horror you're presented with as the audience is
but the supernatural is a surrogate like for a psychological like.
Like, so you're saying
condition.
it's psychological horror dressed in the clothes of
Yeah,
supernatural
exactly.
horror. Yeah. But I don't.
Yeah,
think
like
that,
Hereditary. I would say Hereditary is psychological horror with where the supernatural.
But that's
elements.
a lot less supernatural than.
I mean, when there's supernatural elements, there's supernatural elements. You know what I mean? And when they stand in for something.
This is just evidence for it being a difficult term to apply.
Yeah, for sure.
It's often there alongside another genre.
When I wrote it down, I definitely had more clarity. So,
Yeah,
but I'm glad we had this conversation because
yeah.
it's kind of interesting to see what everyone thinks of it, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes that's important.
I still think it's good. If something was described as a psychological horror, then I'd want to watch it.
I would definitely say it's a real genre.
Yeah.
So.
Well, now you talk
horror.
about it. I don't think it's a real genre. So, yeah.
I'll be backtracked.
Yeah.
Don't know what you're hating. Man.
So my number one slasher.
Yeah.
It's the most. It's pick up and play.
Yeah.
You can just put it on whenever. You can get back home with some mates and go, yeah, should we watch this? Should we put that on? Throw that on. Easy to go to the cinema. Most of them are about an hour and 20 minutes, hour and a half. So they're nice and palatable as well. And I just enjoy them. They're fun to watch a lot of the time.
The cool thing about slashers, and I genuinely can't remember which list I put them on, but the cool thing about the cool thing about slashers.
Overrated.
It's going to take a U-turn.
I might have to backtrack all of this in a second. Yeah.
Delete.
But the cool thing about slashers is like obviously like they've become formulaic, but the formula itself like has entered pop culture, right? Like people know it, and that gives you like a framework to kind of play around with the slasher genre, like Scream, obviously, but also In a Violent Nature, which you saw as well, right? Which just twisted it.
Yeah,
it was actually a relatively straightforward slasher, but with just a twist.
Yeah,
that for me worked very well. I'm not sure what you thought.
I don't reckon it was very good until about an hour in, and then it became more of what I expected.
Yeah. But do you think that's an expectation thing, or like?
I just thought it was a little bit boring beforehand.
Yeah.
I thought it was a bit too much.
Some harsh criticism there.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the movie, so I can't weigh in.
It just felt like a walking simulator, and I was like, okay.
I think it's like interesting. I think it was interesting that they did that, like ballsy. And
I mean, it is interesting. I'm not saying it isn't interesting.
Yeah.
Like it is boring, but it's also very interesting what they did.
Yeah.
But I think what presented was a bit like.
It might be more interesting to talk about than to rewatch. That's true. There's a lot to talk about with it, probably, right? Like within the context of slashers and stuff.
I also reckon it missed a bit of personality as a film, like because part of the whole slasher thing is the teenagers at camp or something like that, and you kind of get to know them a little bit. When this,
but that was a very deliberate choice, though. We'll get to it.
Anyway,
it sounds like a lot of similar things than to what I was saying about It Follows, right? Like the idea being better than the.
Yeah, potentially, but you at least have to like admire. Right? Yeah, it is kind of similar to that as well. Like, but again, you admire like the ambition and the idea of it. Even if the execution isn't there, like I think there's still lots of good things.
Oh yeah, it doesn't make it a bad movie. For sure. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's my top 5. My overrated picks, which is going to anger everybody.
Better not have vampires in there, man.
No, I didn't even think of vampires, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's even worse.
Sorry, it didn't.
Don't like that.
But it will now. We'll do a vampire special. So number 5, zombie.
Mm-hmm.
So I love a zombie film, and I love 28 Days Later. It's on my top horror list of all time. But man, like you said, 98% of them are the drizzling shits.
It's true.
It's cheap to make up.
But the thing is, like I think it's easier with. What you're saying is correct. There's just so many of them. But zombie, in a way, is one of the easiest genres to like make a top 10 as well. Like to pick 10 really, really good. Like I could probably name 10, 10.
Yeah.
That are really good movies that I could rewatch over and over and over and over.
But it's an oversaturated market now. Yeah. There's just so much of it. You just go, oh man, not another. And another, and I reckon that maybe The Walking Dead was the last straw for me within it.
Yeah.
Because I watched that up to like season 3 or 4, and I went, I'm pretty much done now. I never had any interest after that. I've basically stopped watching zombie horror films. I can't anymore. Yeah. I just can't.
But again, like slashers, which honestly there has been some slashers have a similar problem, by the way, to zombies. But you didn't say that. Slashers are the same. It's very oversaturated. And honestly, even Mike, I bet you've seen like 5% of all slashers that exist. And
correct.
I bet even
it's impossible to
and even like 95% of those are probably you won't watch again, right? So zombies are the same. But and just like slashes though, like people are doing interesting things with zombies, right? Like I can't remember what it's called, but there's that one. I don't know if it was in COVID or if the guy was just locked in his room. I think
like
it's
hashtag
Korean.
alive.
Hashtag alive.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention.
Yeah.
Was that on Shudder? Was that the one on Shudder?
Or Netflix.
It's a Netflix.
Netflix. Yeah.
Might have watched it.
He's like locked in a room, right, and he has to communicate with a drone or something.
Yeah. There's the person opposite. There's
Yeah,
also the
yeah.
French one, which is called something that eludes me, which is very similar. He passes out in a room at a party and then wakes up, and then everybody's gone, and he's there on his own.
Can't think of that one. Sounds like 28 Days
It's
Later.
like, is it called It Comes at Night? Or no, The Night Eats the World?
Oh no, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that they're all over the place, zombies movies, and there are these like little hidden gems, but it's a bit like slasher, I guess. But I'm not looking for hidden gems with slashers. I just like the bad ones. Yeah.
And again, like sometimes you can get that comedy stuff in there, which I do like. So when they did Zombieland and One Cut of the Dead, which kind of
One Cut of the Dead,
fantastic.
Underrated. We should have got that on the list.
Yeah.
Underrated in our own brains, apparently.
But so it can work really well. Shaun of the Dead. I mean,
Well,
like,
yeah,
all of
yeah,
these,
yeah.
it works. Zombies
Yeah.
work really well with comedy as well. Because I reckon a lot of the older zombies are probably a bit dated, so they lend themselves to the comedy of today, where you can kind of.
Well, it's easy. It's an easy thing to make comedy about when your original pre 28 Days Later zombies are just these shambling corpses that you can just like speed walk away from very easily. So
it's like when Daleks couldn't go upstairs.
Like,
until
the
Eccleston
until the Eccleston episode.
Number 4, maybe a bit more from ignorance of not watching many, but I tend not to. Although it encompasses a lot more, is like a monster horror. I don't necessarily watch a lot of them.
Depends what you mean. Do you mean like kaiju movies as well, like Godzilla and King Kong? And
Yeah, I guess so. I don't. I'm not bothered. I've never been bothered by Godzilla. I these sort of things don't interest me.
So, which kind of ones are you talking about that you don't really like that much that you've seen?
Just kind of like if you hadn't have recommended The Thing to me, I probably wouldn't have watched it, knowing that there was like going to be some sort of monster.
All right.
In it. I just don't know what it is. I've never really been interested in.
What about Alien? What about like
Frankenstein's
Alien
monster.
or something? Like it's sci-fi, but
Alien's
it's a monster.
more
movie.
Alien toes the line for me.
I mean,
'cause
Jurassic
it's-
Park, you could argue, is a monster movie because what is a dinosaur?
I don't mind some monsters. I just, in the horror sense, I just find that most of the time they're underwhelming. Like the monster never lives up to what it's meant to be.
Do you like human antagonists then more?
I do, yeah. I think they're creepier.
Yeah, well, they definitely
Actually,
are.
and
Yeah.
I reckon a lot of the monsters you see in horror films are just kind of a bit like, oh, that's not as bad, or I thought it was going to be, or it looks a bit fake or something. I don't know. I'm just more of a human protagonist.
Do you like creature features or like survival movies? So like like an alligator or something like that. Have you seen any of those?
Yeah, I watched one about in Australia, which I think only got released in Australia, about a monster that came back to life in the trees in the bush, and it didn't really make it outside of Australia. It was okay. It was a bit.
Yeah. Well, I think like Animal Attacks is a different genre, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a movie called Razorback that you'd probably like, unless you've seen it already. That's an Australian horror movie where it's like a gigantic warthog that's like crashing through people's living rooms and doing untold damage and needs to be stopped in a Jaws kind of way. It's good.
What about Rogue? Well, Jaws is obviously the main example, but Rogue. So that's from the same director as Wolf Creek, and that really
I've not
good.
seen it. I don't think.
Yeah, it's a pretty low budget, like Australian movie, right? Like a bunch of people go out into like whatever the Australian swamps, I don't know where it is, and they meet just a big alligator, and they just have to survive on an island, and they get killed off one by one. It's way better than it sounds. It's really good. I think that director is just good. I think
like, there's a movie that's just called Alligator from the 80s, and that's really good. Yeah.
So number 3 for me is I'm not sure if it's such a subgenre, more of a trope that happens, but like sort of rape horror.
Yeah.
Do we want to call it rape horror?
No, but like that in horror movies doesn't ever really
like
do much for
Last
me
House
at all.
on the Left and those kind of
like a rape revenge kind of thing. Or just any movie that contains it.
Has to be a very good reason for me when there's rape in a movie, in a
Yeah,
horror
yeah,
film,
yeah.
because sometimes it feels like it's done.
Well, I mean, if you
Just because.
voyeuristically,
harking back to the 70s, they did, to a certain extent, insert these scenes purely for shock value, or maybe even like in a horrific kind of sense, titillation purposes, which is not so.
But
great.
I reckon these days we wouldn't.
There's
no
they're
chance
put in for a reason. They're
Yeah.
thematically relevant. Yeah,
And even like the
you would hope anyway.
Yeah, you would.
I mean, there are a lot of like rape, like takes on rape revenge movies coming out now that are like from female writer directors, which is interesting, right? Like,
well, I think that's more relevant.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's something.
Yeah.
Although not sometimes, it's not only women who get raped.
Well,
So
of course,
it can be, but I guess.
To a certain extent, I like this genre, or at least I like the cream of the crop of this genre. I think Last House on the Left, the original Wes Craven one, is one of the best horror movies of all time. It wasn't in my top list, but I think it's
very effective.
brutal.
Like, just like
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It evokes a shock value, but also kind of catharsis of the fact that she's taking revenge on these horrible people. And it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a similar thing, but it's not. It doesn't have the element of rape in there, but it's.
And Last House on the Left isn't as cathartic, right? Because it's her parents, right? It's not her in that one.
I don't remember. I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah.
I Spit on Your Grave is also.
That's
there.
definitely.
Is that what I'm
That's definitely her,
thinking about? Yeah.
I just tend to switch off from movies that contain it. I remember I couldn't actually, when I first watched The Evil Dead, when there's that kind of rape scene in it, I just sort of switched off. Didn't watch it for years afterwards.
The tree.
Yeah, the tree thing. I was just like, that's completely needless.
Honestly, I understand that. Even Sam Raimi was like, what the fuck was I thinking?
Yeah. And
that is purely there for shock value.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like he was doing the video nasty thing.
But I don't agree with
trying to be
being there.
transgressive on purpose.
I don't know if it should be there just for shock value, because sometimes shock value is like, oh fuck you, like.
But that's another thing though, right? Because it seems cheap now, but at the time it was pushing boundaries, and it was something that they weren't allowed to show. So at the time it was a big.
It's
thing
also
to
something
show.
I remember in Rob Zombie's Halloween.
He has it in a lot of his movies. It really pisses
and stuff.
me off.
It just doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't jam with me.
Yeah, I mean Rob Zombie, not the best director, but Devil's Rejects is great. So.
Number 2, gory horror. So, but that doesn't.
Well, like a torture porn.
Sometimes
torture porn.
Sometimes can go hand in hand with slashers, though, right?
Yes, it can. And sometimes actually I go, oh, that's too much. I don't really want that.
It's about the context. Like because I'm probably gonna end up repeating myself anyway, because I have it on my list as well. Like torture porn specifically. I have like a weird relationship with gore. Like I think something can be ridiculously gory, like early splatter movies, like the Peter Jackson stuff, right? The early Peter Jackson stuff, like Brain Dead.
Bad Taste and
yeah,
kind of
like
movies.
I mean, it's ludicrous gore, like unbelievable gore, like so much blood. But it's easy to abstract away from it. But then there are certain types of violence that feels kind of different. I kind of like the tone and the context, right, of the gore itself.
Definitely.
It's not gore itself.
It's kind of all within that context.
Yeah.
And some films are just put on the earth to just
do that. To be nihilistic. Yeah.
See, yeah, I mean, I like my nihilism in my movies, and I like my brutality in my controversial movies. So I think there are a place for those movies, but it's an acquired taste. It's like the caviar of horror. It's I'm not going to say caviar because that makes it sound really fancy and great. It's like the dirt. It's like eating dirt. There's probably people out there that like doing that, and I'm one of them.
Love it or
movies.
hate it.
Yeah,
that's ideal.
Indeed.
And then number 1 might not come as a shock to you now, and it's not necessarily all of them, but meta horror, because again, it's one of those that I feel like an oversaturation is happening.
Apart from Cabin in the Woods and The Last Screams, which other ones do you like?
I don't know. It's just elements of it within movies these days. So Maxine disappointed me by being stereotypically meta. So you could argue that something within Pearl is quite meta, but with Maxine, it was like it's a horror movie within a horror movie, and I'm like, oh, you're better than that. You can do more than that. Like, it just felt a bit too on the nose. It's on the nose meta stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it comes from maybe my dislike of the last 2 Scream films as well.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since then, I just feel like every single film I watch that says to me that it's going to, like,
I don't think they're as
subvert
common
me.
as they used to be, though, meta horrors.
Well, I'm glad. Anyway, I've done that to death, so I think we should hear Dave's. So,
Well, I'm excited just like you because I don't remember what I wrote. Apparently, number 1, I got crime horror / procedural / mystery.
is this what you love? Is this your...
favorite.
This is
favorite,
underrated.
Favorite,
Favorite.
favorite.
So
yeah.
you're telling me my genre isn't real, and your genre's got 3 slashes in it?
Crime horror. That's a real thing.
Crime horror?
Crime horror. That's a real thing.
Give me an example.
Silence of the Lambs, Exorcist 3,
There's
7,
horror thrillers.
Scream. I'm throwing Scream in there apparently.
Excuse me.
Crime horror. Mate.
Well, there are crimes committed.
Crime horror.
Every single horror movie has crimes committed. They're not by the rules.
Crime horror / procedural / mystery / slasher. Yeah,
That's one genre.
That's
There's
what
four-
I'm
there's
going
four-
with.
There's 3 genres and that
Look,
one made up genre.
I found it really hard to find ones I didn't like, and I also didn't.
You just
narrow
got a
down the
list of every subgenre there.
My list is 15 long. I'm not.
Oh,
gonna, I'm
just
not,
choose
I'm not
5.
going to do all of
They
that.
all got 3 slashes in them.
Some of them have multiple slashes. I'll try and. So number 2, I got psychological. We talked about it a bit already.
yeah.
Yeah. I got Hereditary, Perfect Blue, and Black Swan as good examples of that.
Excellent.
Number 3, folk. I love folk horror, and it's been growing on me even more lately. I got Midsummer, The Ritual, which is really good Netflix horror movie. Apostle, really underrated. Forgot to talk about that. And Men as well, which I loved. And I know that's quite controversial, but I really liked Men.
Yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah.
The Witch as well. I'm now a proponent of that.
Yeah,
So-
The Witch, which I
Should be in
apparently
there.
forgot about. But
Well,
yeah, The Witch also.
I'm getting into folk horror. It's a very new genre for me.
Yeah.
I haven't watched much, and I only recently watched The Wicker Man for the first time.
Yeah, well, that's
The Wicker Man
the
is like
absolute
the-
staple.
Yeah.
It's the best
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
It's not my favorite. It's I guess it's like the archetypical folk horror, but it's not my favorite.
That was one that I had in my top and had to delete to not be an asshole with like 20.
But it's a growing one. I'm looking forward to watching more, including I think Midsummer, as you've already mentioned. We're going to be doing that on the podcast soon.
I'm really looking forward to talking about that.
So you can stay tuned for that one.
And I guess you said before, right? Texas Chainsaw Massacre, then counting it as a folk, right?
I wouldn't say it was full. There is definitely slasher elements in there, but it's before slasher was like really a genre. So I would say.
I mean, like, when does a genre become a genre? And you can retrospectively label things, right? Like, I think it's a slasher personally.
Over like genreification is what I don't really like in music. So it doesn't necessarily need to be
they're useful to a
into
point,
one.
right? Like, and also like most films could arguably go into multiple genres. You know, like they're useful to a point, right?
Yeah.
Number 4, cosmic horror. So like anything like Lovecraft themed. So cosmic horror, like
You're going to have to explain
yeah,
this to
no,
me.
I will. Yeah. I don't know if like Lovecraft invented it, but he definitely popularized the idea of cosmic horror.
I'm not aware of anything literary beforehand, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah. He certainly popularized it, but basically the idea of cosmic horror is that there are, and you can like chime in, Mike, if you like, that there are essentially like entities in the universe just so vast that they're by definition beyond our comprehension and understanding.
Yeah, it's the idea that the scary thing in the dark is uncomprehendable. It's like a Lovecraft novels or short stories shouldn't really be adaptable to the screen because the kind of horrors he's speaking about are you couldn't imagine them from his
but basically
descriptions.
what he'll end almost every
It's
story
like the
with,
unknown.
like
Yeah.
I looked at it, I went insane, basically.
Right.
He doesn't
Yeah.
ever describe anything properly.
Okay.
He just looks at it and they go insane.
Wildcard, I'm going to say the Book of Revelations and the Bible invented cosmic horror, possibly.
Well, maybe, yeah.
With the beast of many eyes and all that kind of shit. Yeah.
I'm honestly, like, you make a good point. Number 5, I'm just checking if there's another one I want to talk about. Number 5, sci-fi. So we got that. Alien, Sputnik, which is a Russian horror movie from a couple of years ago. Really good. I'm not sure if you've seen it. Life, which I love. The Faculty, which I love. And Body Snatchers.
I didn't like Life.
Maybe get it on your rewatch list, mate. Maybe
It seemed like Alien light to me.
That's what I liked about it, to be honest.
I do like Jake Gyllenhaal. So
Yeah.
maybe it needs a revisit.
There's one thing that I want to talk about while we're on genres real quick. It's in my list of favorites. So I'm not sure if it's a genre, but we can talk about it, which is anthologies, horror anthologies.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but I do love those.
Because I mean, arguably, like an anthology doesn't have to be in one genre either, right? Like, but I love them, and every single like horror anthology I've enjoyed to some extent.
That is quite interesting. I'm not really. Yeah. Maybe it's because I'm not as in the know, but I'm not really aware of any anthology movies that aren't horror or horror adjacent. So I think it might actually be a horror subgenre.
I mean, surely there are like
because I think it was popularized in the. I think I can't remember what it's called. But there was one in the 40s, and then it was popularized even more so by
like
Hammer ones.
Dead of Night, right?
Yeah, Dead of Night is I think one of the first ones, and then you got your Hammer ones later on, and then you got your Tales from the Crypt and so on.
Oh man, I love Tales from the Crypt. But yeah, I mean, I love anthologies. I love, but because in a way, like horror, a lot of horror stories work better in a short form, right? Like a lot of horror premises can't be stretched out to a full movie length, and a lot of movies try and do that, and they fail for that reason. When you're like, it would have been better as a short movie or something.
I agree. It's very, very difficult to stretch one particular horror idea and make it scary or tense throughout the entire like length of a movie. That's why a lot of horror movies aren't. There's not really any horror in the first 20-30 minutes as you get to know the characters to shorten that length of time. And why I think most of the time a horror movie shouldn't be above like an hour and 40 minutes.
And another cool thing about anthologies is if there's one that you don't like, you just wait 20 minutes or so and maybe you got another chance, right? And you're constantly engaged as well because you're constantly being reset into a new story, and you have to like reintroduce yourself to this world and these characters real quick, and it's super engaging. And like even really bad ones I find really entertaining. So like there's something called the ABCs of Death.
Yeah, you mentioned it
before. The movie itself is like really long, but basically I think there's 2 of them, but each of them there's 26 letters of the alphabet, right? And they get 26 horror directors, and each director gets assigned a letter of the alphabet, and they can come up with a title starting with that letter, and they can do whatever they want. And they shove them together, like just jam them together in alphabetical order, and they don't flow. They're completely wildly inconsistent in style and tone, and they're completely international. And half of them don't even work, and half of them I don't like. Some of them are too much for me. Some of them are boring. Some of them don't really like work for my taste in comedy or whatever. But it's such a fun experience to just go through and see so many visions, so many stories so quickly. And we also had kind of fun like trying to guess the titles from there as well.
It's like going to a pick and mix section
for
sweets, right? Like
it's
some of them you don't really like.
It's a tasting menu. And a lot of like horror directors, especially like popular ones now, like started off in like anthology projects too. Like I'm not sure of Ty West specifically, but a lot of like his guys that he hang out with, like the guy that did Your Next, I forgot his name. I've forgotten his name. And Joe Swanberg as well, who's also a director, and I can't think of his movies right now. But like that whole group of people, like they all started out together. I think David Bruckner as well, who did the new Hellraiser, and also The Ritual, I think. So it's really cool, like to give people, because they're basically short movies, right? A lot of people like Ari Aster started with short movies. I don't think it was in anthologies. But
I think most horror directors do. Or a lot of
directors do right?
These days. I think they do, because they like go to the New York Film Festival and they screen their short and that kind of thing, and it gets them a budget, etc.
Right then, Dave, let's do some overrated.
Least favorite.
Yes.
Okay. So number 1 for me is a nice multi-slash again. So I got torture porn / splatter / extreme.
Yeah.
I
approve of that. That's 3 things that are one genre.
Yeah, just like crime, horror, procedural, mystery, slasher. So like we spoke a bit about torture porn before. I mean, really, like it basically defines the entire aesthetic of like the 2000s.
I was gonna say it's very 2000s.
Yeah. There are like examples of like quote unquote torture porn movies that I like the original Saw, some of the Saw sequels. I mean, the original Saw isn't a torture porn movie. Some of the Saw sequels I like.
They're quite inventive in their way they
Yeah, I mean, they know what people
Well, yeah,
want.
a lot of
I
people...
mean, like the Saw movies, and actually, arguably, and people have said this, that torture porn is basically the logical next step for slashers.
Yeah,
It's
that's what I
basically
was
it's a
gonna
2000
say.
slasher,
Yeah.
which honestly I kind of agree with.
Yeah.
I just don't like it personally. Yeah, like I say, some of them I like. Saw 10 I loved. Most extreme movies, I'm using extreme in this bracket as well, but I mean like not necessarily even torture porn, but like really extreme stuff. Like
yeah, because I kind of like, like in inverted commas, I don't actually like these movies. I wouldn't rewatch them again. But I think there's it's important for these movies to exist.
Yeah, I was going to go on to say, as well. Like, I mean, I would always advocate for everything to exist, right? Art to exist. Like, there's a kind of a short list of these quote unquote extreme movies that like we've watched together that I think, recommend, or at least like say that I personally see the artistic appeal in them.
Yeah, there's very few of them.
There's not many.
Honestly. Like Cannibal Holocaust,
Salo, yes.
It's a short list.
It's a pretty. I feel like there was another one, but like Irreversible. People say that's an extreme movie. I wouldn't. Well,
I mean, it's got a very extreme scene.
Yeah,
but they're the sort of movies I've never wanted to. Ever touch.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
But then you got the other side, which is like the guinea pig movies and Serbian film and these kind of things.
Yeah, it's not.
They're either so extreme they're like farcical, or they're barely movies at all. They're just there to be
do
like
nothing for me. Like again, you know,
shocking.
make what you want to do, right? Don't actually kill people, but make what you want to do. You know, and you know, I understand that people like get like starts in special effects doing these kind of things as well. So that's great. It's just not for me personally. But like I say, I have seen some, and I do think I would recommend some of them, or at least like I say, I felt I saw something in them. Number 2. It's not really ranked, but number 2, Exorcism, Possession. We talked about it already quite a lot. Like I say, I love To Talk to Me.
Yeah.
And Talk to Me, you might not have seen it. It came out last year, Joe.
Not sure.
It's Australian. It was done by 2 YouTubers actually.
Right.
And it's brilliant. Easily the best movie of last year, above Saw 10.
It's one of my favourites of the last, I don't know. 3 or 4 years. Really
good. Like a genuinely inventive and interesting take, at least in my opinion, on exorcism or possession. So next I
would argue it's kind of adjacent to that though. It's certainly not an exorcism movie.
Okay, I put exorcism / possession.
Yeah. So same as I do.
Yeah, it's a possession. It's a possession movie. It's demons. They're trying to get into the human world. It's a possession movie.
Yeah, but
why would you say it was?
There's very few instances in that movie of people actually being possessed, apart from the bit.
There's a pretty key moment of someone being possessed, and also
I can think of 2 moments.
Yeah, pretty important moments. They're like integral moments.
3 moments.
This is definitely Joe. You need to watch this and weigh in.
Yeah, I will. I will.
I don't think
it's like watching tennis.
Yeah. There's a nice thing about 3 of us, right? When we disagree, we can get you on side.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you're going to be vying for my...
They're all just going to be predisposed Mike Dave arguments that you have to weigh in on each episode.
No pressure or anything. So the next one I got is redneck / cannibal / backwoods horror.
And you're not like...
I don't like them, not that much. Like I said,
I don't like.
There are a lot of bad ones. I don't like to like rewatch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like I say, I think it's a really good movie, and I think it might be the best horror movie ever made. But it's not something I enjoy rewatching.
Not even that episode of the X-Files, because that's a great episode of the X-Files.
That is a good episode. There are exceptions. That's a good episode, but for me, that's that genre through the lens of a procedural, and so I like it for that reason, because it's an X-Files episode first. But for the kind of the extreme for that show, horror elements of that show from the backwards horror, I think really works. But for me, it's like a procedural.
I think it's kind of like an offshoot of slashers, though, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah. It is. I think
redneck murderers.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good ones. Obviously, there shouldn't have been like 7 Wrong Turn movies.
I hate the Wrong Turn movies. Although
the first one and the remake are pretty good.
I like the second one better than the first one, which might be insane, but I do.
Which one's that? Is that the one with the
guy from
snow?
The guy from Black Flag in it as the singer from Black Flag? I think I forgot his name. I think they're filming like a reality show or something.
Yeah, I vaguely remember.
We'll come back to it. But the remake is really good.
Yeah,
because it's basically not a remake of the film at all. It's completely different.
Yeah,
they just
called
name.
it Wrong Turn.
Yeah.
It's not even like Rednecks or anything really.
The last one I got, I'm skipping a few before I talked about. So the last one I got here is Home Invasion. It's just not my favourite. There are good ones. Like I love Mute, the Mike Flanagan.
It's another one that's like a dime a dozen, right? Like
there's a lot of them. They're presumably quite cheap to make comparatively. Like I said, there are good ones. I really want to like The Strangers. I've tried to watch it several times.
Yeah, I should have put that on my overrated.
Yeah,
because people talk about that like
people love
great,
it, and it's got like a
great.
reevaluation lately as well, and people like it even more. And I rewatched it relatively recently, and it's just quite boring. Although it does have a really genuinely scary scene, which is like the scene when the big guy is first in the house. I don't want to say more than that, but
yeah, maybe it needs a rewatch. I don't know.
It's like well made and well shot. I think I don't really like Liv Tyler that much as an actor. But the problem with Home Invasion mostly is they're out the house, they're in the house, the film ends. Like there's not that much you can do with it. I feel like
I think it's another genre for me where the earlier ones are the bests, and from there it's kind of aping the same stuff, but like your Straw Dogs and.
Oh yeah, Straw Dogs is brilliant.
I reckon in its basic form, it's really good. The idea of a home invasion movie.
Well, the idea is terrifying.
Because it's terrifying.
It's
Everyone
really
is terrified.
Really scary idea. Yeah.
In real life,
yeah.
It's quite a terrifying idea of a home invasion. So, on its very basic level, it's absolutely.
It's a great horror concept. It's brilliant.
But as you say, there's a lot of them now.
Yeah, I do think like Slashes and Zombies, that home invasion is a good framework for spinning it up, like flipping it. Like, for example, Don't Breathe, like we talked about. Like, you swap the perspective and then make the people breaking in not the worst people in the story. And the same for...
But he's a hero in number 2.
Let's not talk about number 2. We don't need to talk about number
2. But you have to ignore the fact that he was a horrible person.
And a rapist and all sorts.
Yeah. You have to ignore the fact that happened. But standalone movie is all right. I like the second one.
I reckon we've covered some really interesting ground with that, but... I would say something that I love about horror from all of what we talked about is the fact that it is one of those last mainstream genres that is still able to be so creative.
Yes, I agree.
I reckon you can put films in the mainstream that are really interesting, wacky and interesting, which in other genres today you just could not do and have a successful film.
I think horror is extremely important because it's a pathway to other genres in the first place. Like there's lots and lots of big directors that get their start.
Like Wes Craven, didn't want to be a horror guy.
Yeah, exactly.
He just was.
He got typed. I mean, it even happens with books.
He was too good.
Stephen King wanted to do other things, and they were like, "No, keep printing money with your horror novels."
And like our horror movies, they're probably comparatively cheaper to produce than other genres.
Yeah.
And
you can do so much with a small budget.
You've got a lot more
with a bit of
with
creativity, experimentation. It's just fantastic.
This is why I love, in principle, Blumhouse, like their business model. I know that it's kind of fallen out of favor these days, but for a while they were cranking out some real good stuff.
I love it, even if 90% of them are terrible.
The idea is brilliant. The idea is brilliant. I really admire Jason Blum. I don't know if it was him single-handedly that did it, but that idea. It's brilliant, just give people... I think, it was 10 million upper bound budget, I think. And even if 99 out of every 100 don't work, the ones that do...
Makes it a worthy endeavour.
It's 10x return, right?
It's people financing these movies are doing the same things as we are watching these movies when we're watching these indie and unseen and unknown horror movies, hoping for a hidden gem, and
exactly,
just find nothing at all. They're doing the same thing with scripts and people they believe to be talented, and they should always do that.
So I reckon we're starting to come towards the end, but we should end on some sort of really interesting note from each of us. What got us into horror? So let's end this podcast with what got us into horror in the first place. So Mike, you willing to give it a shot?
So I believe that we've got different formats in this, but my format is a list of influential horror movies I watched as a child / young adult that led me on a little path towards horror. So the first movie on this list is Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
Oh mate, I was going to talk about
that. Absolutely brilliant. and obviously aimed at children, and obviously it's a Scooby-Doo movie, but it's actually kind of scary for a Scooby-Doo movie / kids film, and introduces, probably for me at the age of, like, I don't know, 6, the idea of things being scary or threatening or tense and that kind of thing. Also, as an aside point, there should be more werecats in movies. There's werecats in that, whereas the other werecats in any other movie. So that's my first one. Second one, I absolutely loved Fantasia as a child. And specifically the end. I don't know how
the
how
devil
you know.
one.
Yeah,
right?
it's to Night on Bald Mountain is
Yeah.
the name of the song that I've noted down. And it's got the devil at the top of the mountain, and he's rising up.
It is
the
scary.
lava.
Like, it's actually scary. Yeah.
That's definitely quite horror-y,
Yeah.
and that was me I don't know what age I was getting.
The broomsticks,
Yeah.
that bit, that always is like,
Yeah, there's somewhat, that's horror underscored kind of haunting stuff going on, not just the melody, but the fact that he's smashing these like slaves that he's created to bits, and they're coming after him again.
that is what happens.
Yeah, it is quite horror-y. Yeah, Fantasia is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's traumatizing.
Well, it got me into horror, so I thank it. Yeah. The Mummy is the next one, which everybody here knows is probably my favourite movie of all time, and I've got the whole script in my head.
Recently re-released at the cinema as well. It was on the other day at Cinema.
Yeah. I did see on Instagram that people had gone to watch it, and I wasn't aware of it, and it saddened me that
I'd love to see that film at the cinema.
Yeah. I love The Mummy. And famously of the adventure / archaeological horror genre.
Yeah.
It's
well, I suppose it is in a way.
No.
Few and far between, but they bring them out every 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And everybody loves them and wants more. The next one is obviously Jurassic Park, which I think for a lot of people, especially of our age, that's one of their first dips into horror, because a lot of people wouldn't argue it's a horror movie, but I would say it's definitely horror.
For sure,
it's
like,
sci-fi
Like,
horror.
there's scenes within it as well,
Yeah.
where
Just
it's
like
dark and
like
it's
Jaws,
rain.
right?
Yeah. When she backs into the corner and there's the disembodied arm of Samuel L. Jackson, and she's on the chase from the raptors, and
It's quite gory. Like Star Wars is surprisingly gory as well. Right? Like,
Next one is Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman. It's another. In fact, I should have listed that in my adventure horror. I think it's a little bit like that. It's got,
could be a vampire.
yeah.
Horror.
It's definitely a vampire horror. Yeah, it's the marrying of my two favorite worlds. Signs, which is I think one of the more underrated Shyamalan movies. I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Probably
one
my
of the
second
best.
favorite.
I'd argue it's my favorite. Are you putting it after Sixth Sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think Sixth Sense is brilliant, but it's weakened on the rewatch because you know the.
I don't
twist.
think it actually is. I don't think it is. I thought it might be, but no, I don't think so. No.
Fair enough. X-Files, which we've already somehow mentioned about 3 times already. Yeah, we had the like DVD box set of all like 10 seasons or whatever, and I remember as a child just watching those through the summer holidays back to back over and over again. Most of them were, especially in the latter part of it, not good, but you get like a full swathe of different horror types, different thriller types, etc.
Lose a bit after Mulder is no longer in it.
Yeah, well, that's quite late on. I mean, they lose Scully earlier than that, don't they?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think the first 3 seasons, I mean, there's some bad episodes in there, but for the most part, the first 3 seasons are pretty good.
You got to remind that about
Yeah.
TV series that used to be 24 episodes as well.
Yeah, that's a lot of work to put into.
It's a lot of creativity to come up with the
every
monsters
time.
and yeah.
It's great as a viewer though, because it's like half a year.
Yeah,
watching
yeah.
It, right?
Yeah. I quite like Robert Patrick as well, just in general.
Yeah,
I liked
great,
him being the Mulder substitute, even though some of the storylines were weaker then. I didn't mind it. Evil Dead 2, obviously, and Shaun of the Dead, obviously, which we've already been through. So they're more like, I guess, young person friendly.
Yeah.
Because they're comedy horrors, but that was another step in the road. And then Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when I saw that was basically like
a light
I'm
bulb
in.
going off.
I'm just in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's great. There's some real like interesting sort of delving into your mind about like Fantasia and stuff. That's I've never
honestly,
connected the dots with it, but yeah, you're so right.
Yeah.
Honestly, of all the things you said, Fantasia is the most horrifying.
Yeah.
It's definitely probably the earliest one. I should have put that first, really. But like, I think I hadn't actually realised that the Mickey Mouse Sorcerer's Apprentice is kind of horror adjacent with the because he's
like
basically getting
murdering
more
them.
and more
Yeah.
traumatized and harassed by these things.
I always think of the Itchy and Scratchy episode when I think of that.
Yeah.
Right, so yeah, for me, I've done it very differently. I've just got a little story because I hadn't really thought back that far to like Fantasia and things I grew up with like that. But I thought more to when I was just in about year 8, about 12 years old at school, and people started talking about horror films to me, and the one that came up a lot was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And they were like, it's based on a real story. This is true.
Yeah, classic.
And all the rumors that spread with that.
Schoolyard.
Yeah.
shenanigans,
And so I just could never watch it. My dad would never go to Blockbusters and get that for me. We would never be able to watch it. There was no way I could until Freeview became a proper thing, and it was in my bedroom. And I remember just having the TV on really late at night when I was sort of 12, and I saw what the kid at school had been talking about, and it was Texas Chainsaw on film 4. I was like,
We're talking about the original here.
the original, the original one, yeah. And so I put it on, and I could watch for about 5 minutes before I was just quivering under my pillow, and I couldn't watch anymore, and I had to turn
It's got
it off.
quite a tone, especially in the
Yeah.
latter half with the soundtrack and stuff. So I can imagine flicking on at that time, and it's quite.
And I'd never been really exposed to it in my life ever. So that was just a moment in my life when I was just petrified of something, and then I wanted more. Like, it's funny, it's very addicting, and it wasn't that I got scared off it. It was like I got scared onto it.
Yeah, it's the same reason people ride roller coasters and.
Yeah, exactly.
That
There's
kind
a
of
real
thing.
thrill with watching a horror film, and that's something that I love about the genre in general. And I think the next thing that really happened is I started hearing about Scream, and Scream was one of the first ones. I do remember my dad getting really angry at me in Blockbusters because we went in there, we'd get a film on like a Friday, and I really wanted to get Scream. Far too young. And I nearly got him to do it. It was like, I was like, can we get it? Can we get it? And he's like, what am I doing? No, it's an 18. He put it back on. He was like, oh no. And I was really upset. But it's all those early, I was desperate. I was clawing for more horror.
Yeah,
And
I
then
think there's a certain psychological element of knowing they're movies for adults.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when you're a
at that
kid,
like early
and
teenager
they're like,
phase when you just want to grow up, right?
yeah, you want to be 18 when you're
Yeah,
only
yeah.
14 or whatever, and
But-
you want to get all that stuff right then.
I kind of miss the days where something like Scream would terrify me, like when I wasn't exposed to it.
Yeah,
like that those early days of watching it.
Telling
where-
me, man.
You've seen a lot.
I've seen all the extreme shit, and
Yeah.
I'm still not scared. So.
And that's why it wasn't until I later on watched The Descent that I felt that again. So that's why that ranks so highly in a way for me.
Movie of the
because-
podcast.
Yeah, movie of the movie of the century.
Yeah.
So really, that's kind of my introduction to horror as an actual genre, rather than the things that preceded it. But that's really interesting. Again,
Yeah,
Like,
well, we can
it all
revisit
adds
it at
in,
some
right?
point if
Yeah,
you,
we should do an episode on Fantasia. I reckon.
I loved it.
I'd like to watch it
Absolutely.
again.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
I've not
so-
seen
I wish there were
years.
more movies like that. Like
Yeah.
there's Daft Punk did one called it's not horror obviously, but Interstellar 55 I think it's called, or 555. But I love it when people take a suite of music or an album, don't add any dialogue or any particularly unnecessary dialogue, and just have it as like a visual piece
the
to go
Daft
along.
Punk thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that with Pink Floyd's The Wall and those kind of things. I wish that was more of a popular genre. Yeah. In fact, Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love that
I
soundtrack.
absolutely, like, if anyone could ever just make like an animated film to go
That would
along
be
with
cool.
that album,
Yeah, that would
it
be
would be
great.
instantly one of my favorite things.
I
So-
have a DVD of like the cast recording of it, like a
Oh, right,
video of the show,
oh,
which
that's
I watched
awesome.
I watched twice in one night once. I just went around
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah. It's
I
really
might
cool,
look. I might
like
look
the
for
narrator
that.
is like
Yeah.
a big giant head in the middle of the stage, floating down, looking at everyone.
It's
Pretty
Richard
weird.
Burton, isn't it, who does the narration?
Yeah,
For
it
Jeff
is.
Wayne.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah,
it is,
yeah.
Absolutely
What a voice.
brilliant. One of the
Yeah,
best
yeah,
concept
yeah.
albums of
Yeah.
all time. Yeah.
Right then, Dave, take us home.
Well, I'm a
going to end the podcast by losing my horror credentials, probably, because I grew up as a massive Freddy cat.
Right.
I hate.
I mean, a lot of people do.
Yeah. I hated the idea of horror growing up. We never really watched it when I was a kid. My parents don't like it either. And I remember like staying up, like watching a movie like Armageddon or something at night, and on Film 4, whatever it was, and they'd have the advert breaks and they would show like upcoming movies, and I remember like them once like showing a trailer for John Carpenter's is it Village of the Damned or Children of the Damned? Village of the Damned?
Village of the Damned.
Yeah. And I remember like shutting my eyes and covering my ears for the whole duration of the advert. Just the advert scared the shit out of me. Yeah. It was when I was at school, and it was actually like through friends that I got onto horror. It was a lot Joe. It was a lot you actually. I don't quite remember the order of these things happening, but I have a memory that one of the first proper like adult horror movies I watched was on a coach. We're going to Paris, and you had Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning.
Oh yeah, I used to love them
on your iPod.
iPod
On your
Classic.
iPod Classic.
Yeah.
Which one's the beginning? Is that the?
It's the sequel to the remake.
The prequel
To the remake.
Yeah, not a good one.
It was one of my first ones, and I loved it at the time.
I hated, and you loved it, and I hated it.
Really?
I thought it was horrible. I was like, I can't say this. I was so shook. I was fucked. Like,
I never knew this.
For like the whole.
You probably could have shown him anything. Anything
probably,
horror,
for like
and he would
the
have
whole
had the same reaction.
Because that was like peak 2000s horror. It was nihilistic as shit, and like because it's a prequel. It has a sad ending because nobody gets away. Yeah. And I was so depressed for like the rest of the
for the whole
for the rest of the but for like the drive there
up the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Teens 1 and 2.
And that I have another memory of you coming around to my house one time, Joe, and bringing like a. God knows, like 3 or 4 carrier bags full of DVDs. A lot,
big.
Like he was saying for like
going into the pub selling them.
It's like saying for like one night or something.
Yeah.
Like I mean, you gotta
have a choice. It's before streaming.
Exactly. And there's at least
got the whole Netflix library in a bag.
At least one bag just wrestling stuff, right? Of course. But then the other bag was like horror movies. I remember, and we spent that weekend like watching all the slashers.
Yeah.
So we did like the original Halloween. We did Rob Zombie's Halloween, I think. We did Friday the 13th.
What a weekend.
And that's what I was saying. I was like, this is quite like an induction into like especially slashers.
Yeah.
And we finished it off. I was like, I can take it, no worries. We finished it off with the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it messed me up again. And I was like, oh, this is so much scarier than Halloween and like Friday the 13th, and even like the Rob Zombie Halloween.
Tone,
like it is.
Really?
I was not ready at all.
Yeah.
And it, again, was I think the last one we watched, and you went home, and like that Sunday night, I was like, oh, God's sake. But it definitely like awoke something in me because I started to then like we also had another friend, Steve, our friend Steve, who loved horror movies, and when I go to his house, he knew I didn't watch them, so he'd always make us watch a horror movie.
This mysterious Steve.
He's a real person.
He's a real person.
I've known you like 12 years, never met this Steve. Supposed horror fan.
He's a real
We'll get him on the podcast.
We'll get him in. Yeah. And like he mainly watched like contemporary stuff at that time, so like 2000s horror. So like lots of Saws. Like I think the first Saw I watched was Saw 4. Yeah, I had no idea what the hell was going on. Like no idea at all.
The twist at the end must have been so confusing. Like,
I literally
had no idea,
what's going on. Yeah. We're just like eating pizza and I'm watching some woman get scalped. And I'm like, Jigsaw's dead? What the hell's going on?
It's like taking the pizza topping off.
Yeah. But there was something about like
scalping
him and you in that
pizza,
time.
as they say.
Yeah.
Scalping the pizza. Sorry.
There was something. I couldn't get it out of my head, I guess, and I started to like.
You should have scalped.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just to get it out, scalp it off.
If you don't like it, scalp it off. Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
And I started to like hunt them out myself. Like when I had the house to myself or something, I'd go on to like watch movies online or something. And I'd be seeking out the other Saw movies to try and catch myself up, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you know, I was just going down the rabbit hole. Then eventually I discovered Scream, and from there I was hooked. And then from Scream, I was like, I have to show everybody Scream, and then like Shaun of the Dead, like all around that time, I was just hooked.
It's oftentimes the franchises
that
hook people in, right?
And then I was reflecting back. Like I said, I didn't grow up watching horror, and my parents hate horror. But I reflect back, and I think that it was always kind of in me in a way, because I loved Scooby-Doo. I loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer especially. As a kid, and also The Mummy as well. I think there would have been a time when I would have said that was my favorite film as well for a long time growing up.
Yeah.
And I look back.
Archaeological horror.
Yeah. It's not a real genre. It's not a real genre.
Oh, I'm so happy that you love archaeological / adventure horror, just like me.
I like The Mummy. I like The Mummy.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
Yeah. Indiana Jones, famous horror movie.
And just from there, like it became like addictive, like you say. Just always kind of pushing it out, and yeah, with horror, I think being like so diverse as well. And there's so many subgenres, like as we talked about before, and just discovering a new subgenre, and then doing a little bit of reading and finding out the popular stuff, and it just becomes a whole thing. And really, from like I don't know, like the mid to late 2000s, between then and now, I haven't really stopped. And yeah, it's my favorite genre.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Because there's a lot more of a community when it comes to horror and also sci-fi than most other genres.
Yeah, these quote unquote genre movies, right? These outsider
there's like
movies, right? There's
kind of like a community that mostly talks about these kind of movies.
It's a bit of a niche as well.
Yeah.
Because
they're
not.
Like, I don't know how popular horror movies must be. Very
well. Horror's
very
definitely getting more
popular.
popular.
Horror's really people like being scared.
Yeah.
Well, and people love A24 now. Like that's broken out right outside of like the horror community. People love A24. It's a big result, like this elevated horror thing, like basically a response to like torture porn. Starting with like the Babadook and this kind of thing. It people like really latched onto it, and it's like broken out and become super popular.
So long as it's still referred to as a horror movie, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Like, the problem is a lot of people say they don't like horror movies, but they'll still like the kind of elevated horror movies that you would describe. Yeah, what's going on there?
Right, I reckon we'll finish it off there for today. That's an epic session for us.
Yeah.
Probably split it into a few. So I hope you've enjoyed listening or watching, whatever you're doing. And a bit of an introduction, a bit of a general show. We'll be back next week with a film. We're not quite sure what yet, but we've got a few in the pipeline. And we've definitely got Midsummer on the list. What else is on the list coming up soon?
Night of the Living Dead, I think.
Night of the Living Dead. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
And see you, Mike. Nice to see you.
See you, Joe. See you, Dave.
See you, Mike.
Dave.
Nice to see you. See you,
You've
Joe.
enjoyed it?
Nice.
Had a good time?
Yeah, I've had a very good time. Have you had a good time?
I've had a great time.
Dave had a good time.
I had a good time.
Nobody asked Dave if he was having a good time.
I had a good time. I had a good time. I did have a good time.
Well,
I could have done without making up genres, to be honest with you, but I was good.
Who made up genres, man?
And we can all agree The Descent is the greatest horror film of all time.
I think we've
then.
decided we nailed it. We've
Consensus,
peaked.
yeah.
There
If
we go.
there was a poll, it would have won.
Can you imagine if
Absolutely.
we all watch it again and we're like,
No, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. All right, see you soon. See you next week.
Yeah.
bye.